Yeah, you know who it is. And for those of you that don't, I am Cytonius, the opposite of the phonius. I haven't said that in a while because I haven't been working on stuff, and I'll probably talk about that a little bit in this video. But with me today is the other half of the path, Mr.
It's just Darius. You don't gotta say Mister.
I was making it theatrical.
Yeah, I know. But
Yeah.
uh,
So today on this episode of the Omnicast, we're going to be talking about um Spawn of all characters, but I feel like there's a specific reason why this was chosen. Honestly, I'm gonna be 100% real. I feel like this is mostly you like wanting to talk about Spawn, even though I have shit to say about Spawn, and me and you we've had like conversations in the past. But I'm gonna pass the baton to you. I'm gonna let you kind of set it
uh,
off on the direction of where we're going with this.
well, it was kind of just a long time coming, honestly, because we over the years have had so many conversations about him,
Hmm.
and we would have pocket conversations of just what's like. There would be times where we would talk about what Spawn represents one day, and then a few months later, we'd rope ourselves into another Spawn conversation about what Spawn represents this day, and it would just compile and compile. And this is kind of like us just finally like putting our money where our mouth is, in a sense of just like, all right, well, finally we need to sit down and kind of hammer out and express our views, our likes, our dislikes, um, our aspirations for this particular character that we both uh, dearly care about and have our own experiences with. And who also a character that has one of the longest running comic books ever.
Yep. Yep.
And no one, he's like the Detective Conan of comics. Like everyone talks about One Piece, but Detective Conan's right there. Everyone talks about, oh, Batman, this is the long Batman. I'm like, yeah, but Spawn has like on issue 300 plus of something consistently.
Yeah,
So,
because yeah, and that's rare for like you got to think about that. That's rare for Image Comics because the only other
yeah,
Image comic character from like the inception of Image that still has an ongoing comic is the Savage Dragon.
yeah. And there are people who don't even know who Savage Dragon is, which is a whole other conversation.
Uh,
Uh,
Bruh.
but, but it's it's something that I've definitely wanted to talk about, especially in the wake of the news of the Spawn movie still moving forward at Blumhouse and the rumors of how Todd McFarlane wants Spawn to be represented and wants to highlight certain characters over his own child. I don't understand that as a creator. I don't understand that, but
well,
whatever.
well, hold up. So I want to start with one question though, because I feel like it's always
Yeah,
important to ask this question. What was your introduction to Spawn?
I've had hmm, it's touchy, honestly, because it is a mixture of things. I did not. How can I? So I never saw the Spawn movie in theaters. It's not because it was rated R or because it was,
I don't think it
because
was rated R
was
actually.
it? It probably
It,
wasn't.
it
But
was PG. It was PG-13.
okay, I didn't see it in theaters. I wish I did, but I was. What year did Spawn come out?
The comic or the movie?
The movie
97. The summer of 97.
'97. Okay, so I was definitely. I would have actually seen it, but they probably. I don't know why my parents didn't take me to see that. But so it's a mixture of the Spawn movie, buying a Spawn comic from Union Station.
Mm.
We live in DC for people who want a geographical understanding of this. Um, so we live in DC. Everyone who's from DC, everyone grew up at some point in time spending time in Union Station.
Hmm.
So um, between that and then the HBO Spawn series that I
Mm.
would watch, that my parents let me watch because they didn't care if I was watching. If it was sexual, they would be like they would still watch it with me, but they would tell me to turn away. But if it was like horror, like straight up like visceral, terrible stuff, they didn't care. They bought
Hmm.
me it. They bought me it on VHS and said that that was supposed to be for you. And I'm like, all right, okay. I watched it. I loved it, but still. Um, but anyway, back on topic. Um, so it was the Spawn TV series, and then I was one of those kids who would just window shop online. So I would always go to the Spawn website where Todd McFarlane would post all of his new Spawn figures for the year, or the projected Spawn figures that were coming out the following years. And I would like read the figure information that he would put out for them. So like the lore information that they would have, I
Hmm.
would be reading that on the Spawn website. And I, like I said, only had a few Spawn comics because I don't think my parents even knew where comic book stores were. So
Mm.
me finding that Spawn comic, in the same sense of me finding the Predator comic, were on a whim. Uh, and then it was just a period of just nothing. I wasn't reading anything Spawn. I didn't even know where to get anything Spawn for real growing up. And then eventually, when I became a teenager, I started to pick up on Spawn again. And then I started reading more of it. And then my biggest memory when I started reading Spawn again, trying to catch up and consume so much, was when Todd McFarlane entered Spawn Endgame, and he was going to kill
Mm.
Al Simmons and bring in I forgot the character that Spawn replaced
Is
Al.
it was Jim something? Jim,
Yeah,
what the fuck
because
is his name?
I don't want to say White Spawn because that we'll get into that. We'll get into that later because I hate when people bring that up, because Jim is actually a very respectable character, and because I've read enough with him and I know the context. I know Jim's context. I know the context of how this happened, and and what birthed after that. But I think people just look at Jim and go, "See, that can be," and I'm like, this is Jim's a whole different character than Al Simmons Spawn. It's like if you got Dick Grayson to be Batman. It's like that's Dick Grayson as Batman, but that's not Batman. Spawn is Al Simmons, is Al Simmons is Spawn. It's as simple as that.
Yeah,
And also Jim became a completely different character moving forward and today.
Jim
So
Downing is his name.
yeah,
Yeah,
Jim became, if I'm not mistaken, became his own character after Al came back.
yeah.
But um yeah, so that's how I pretty much got into everything, and like I said, from the movie to a few comics to the definitely the HBO series that I watched, and then trying to track down whenever Todd McFarlane would post new figures. But
Mm.
then, but over time, he started to post sports, and I realized the era was coming to an end. So
That's
uh,
wow. That's quite an origin
yeah.
story.
Sorry,
I
he'd be like
mean,
he would post MLB figures, and I'm like, bro, what's happening? What's going on? Halo, MLB, where are the Spawn figures? Where? And they're gone. They were
so
gone. They were gone.
they were gone, and we could talk about that too because there's some lore behind that as well. But for me, I actually what year are you born? You born in 93, right? 93, 94.
Yeah.
So yeah, Spawn, the first issue came out in 92. So I was 11 or 12. And I
Hmm.
bought it when it came out because it was like the biggest thing ever in comics. Like 1992 was like the biggest comics that were coming out was Youngblood, which is actually the first title from Image, Spawn, and I want to say the Death of Superman. I think like all of those came out around the same time. So you mentioned that you didn't know where comic book stores were at a certain point when you were like really young. I just happened to know where they were because I discovered comic book stores because I went on a field trip to a mall when I was like in the fourth grade, and the mall we went to, they had a comic book store there. It was called Heroes, and unfortunately, when I make these, I try to put like clips and videos, images. There are no images of Heroes comics because it was like in Landover Mall in like 1992,
It's the
and
images in your head. You have to
the
believe.
yeah, bruh, if I extract the images of like fallen comic shops from the early 2000s, we could be sitting here for hours talking about
I,
those shits. Clubhouse collectibles, another universe, Jeppies, all the motherfuckers. Like, yeah, but yeah, I bought the first issue of Spawn when it came out, thinking like, yo, I'm gonna be rich, and now look at us, broken in a motherfucker. But my first exposure to Spawn was when he came out, and I remember not really giving a fuck, like honestly, like because the books weren't really good. Like the art was great, but the stories, the first like year or two of Spawn wasn't shit wasn't good. And I remember what got me into Spawn, the character, was the animated series on HBO. And that had come out when I was like a teenager. I was like 16 or 17. And Spawn, the animated series, came out around the same time that like I'm not gonna say I was discovering anime, but I'd already been in the wheelhouse of anime, seeing things like Wicked City and Ninja Scroll, and this real crazy fucked up anime called Yurosuki Doji, Legend of the
mm,
Overfiend. Look it up if you're not familiar with it. But it was Spawn the animated series that really made me fall in love with the character, and it made me go back and start looking for the comics, and then I was reading the comics and I'm like, this shit ain't good. Like this is not like the TV show. And
yeah.
I find that interesting because I feel like Spawn is the most popular comic book character that most people haven't read his comics, except for maybe you. Like,
No, I mean there are people who have. I just think that I guess this is our next segue into just what the I don't know. I guess I don't know the malfunction of adaptation. I don't know what to call it, but there is there's something about him that is so mysterious, yet is also so simple,
mm,
and no one has really cracked it. And I can't say the live action film has cracked it, but I can say that
no, fuck no.
the
The TV
TV
show did.
show did. The TV show understood the idea of, especially I love the way the TV show escalated, but I also love the way it it kept the action, it kept the darkness, even the most action-packed things, especially in the first season, were very just in the dark. And I love that.
That's
And
real. Yeah.
it really spoke to Al's psyche of just like Al is still in the dark. We're in the dark with him. We don't know these, but this character, this person is the inverse of what people dream in terms of getting superpowers. If Peter Parker got bitten by a spider, he's swinging through the air, happy, colorful. If Iron Man gets a suit, he's doing whatever. There's a celebration of power. But Spawn is not a celebration of power. He even has a
Mm.
meter telling you when how much power he's using. Which I no sidetrack. I hate that fucking meter. I am so glad it's gone. I'm so glad it's gone.
Oh
And
wait.
one of the main reasons, and I don't mean, and this is, I don't want to make this a super big thing, but it's going to be a super big thing because it is what it is. There was a point in time where I did not know before, uh, before, I, it was a very short point in time, but when I discovered this, and when I discovered this, I, I really latched on to Spawn even more, as cliche as it sounds. But when I found out that was a whole ass black dude, and that Todd did not make it fucking clear until like later when he realized, oh shit, maybe I should make it clear that Al is a black man and stop burning his face. Um, because he even made Al in one of the very early issues when Al uh disguised himself. Now, granted, I will give that particular early issue a little bit of grace because story wise, yeah, Al. didn't know how to use his powers. So maybe he would accidentally turn into somebody else. But you didn't have to. You could have just, I don't know. I just felt like that was weird. But he made him a white dude, which is fine for what Al was trying to do because he was trying to be in disguise. But it's just when I discovered that, a lot of things changed. I started to hate the meter. I started to hate the melancholy of it all. But as I got older, I started to understand the melancholy of a character like him
Hmm.
and how there's Spawn is more of just the burden of power. Beyond behind all of this cool stuff behind the guns, beyond all of that, in the center of it is it's just a story about a man using evil to fight evil because that's in a sense that's all Al's ever known is evil. He's always been tormented. He
Yeah.
he doesn't even he's not even what's the word? He's not fertile. He's not even fertile. I was not even fertile. So
Yeah.
no, but he's not fertile.
No, I know.
They
Yeah, yeah.
they had a child. No, I forgot how that went. I forgot when Al came back. I forgot how that. I gotta reread it. I think it was in Satan Saga Wars, if I'm not mistaken. And they were like, oh, we found your child or whatever, but it was his soul, if I'm not mistaken. If I read that right, but it's just it. There's so much stacked against him, and he uses what's stacked against him and carries it, and really carries that weight. And that's one of the many things I like about him. Even
Yeah.
though, yeah, he has this, cool looking exterior, but I mean, he's a sweetheart. That man will fold for Cyan. He will fold for Wanda. Like, I will protect Cyan. I will destroy him. I will kill himself before anything happens to Cyan.
Well,
Always.
well, I think so. I think one of the things with Spawn, um, that I find interesting is that, um, Spawn is very subversive. We've established that, with him
Yeah,
being a
he is.
black character. Even though, and I feel like people don't discuss this, Image Comics was very progressive in their characters. They had a lot of black characters. They had Chapel. They had my man Shadowhawk. I feel like Savage Dragon is kind of coded as a black man. You know what I'm saying? Like you take that with a grain of salt, and of course Al Simmons, right? And that does resonate. It resonates very much so. But I also think with Spawn, like Spawn is very strange because, and we've talked about this before. Like Spawn is one of the best worst comics ever because it's
Yeah,
one of the longest running comics that doesn't really have a definitive like run. You know what I'm saying? Like you can look at like the Immortal Iron Fist, and Iron Fist is a character that it's like 40, 50 years old, right? It's not a lot of great Iron Fist stories for real. But the Immortal Iron Fist that came out like in 2005, that shit is perfect. You can look at characters like Moon Knight, who has I forgot what his
I will.
what's my bad.
I
Go
don't
ahead.
want to cut you off. I will say this because Spawn is a continuous, ongoing series. There is no. I would argue that there is no the definitive run is Spawn.
Well, so what I mean though is definitive story arc, like a story arc that stands out. Where
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. The only reason I'll say, and the only reason Endgame stood out is because it was the shock of Spawn dying. They made
what
that a big deal. But other than that, yeah, I can't.
what well no. So
There are arcs that I like, but I know they're not popular.
that's what I mean. That's what I'm getting
Yeah.
to. Like there are not arcs where like, oh, we've based a Spawn TV show off of this because
Right.
even the animated series isn't really based off of the comic like that. It's based off of the comic in spirit with the characters, but a lot of those like 3 seasons of Spawn the animated series, that's not based on any direct storyline. It's like snippets from like certain issues and stuff, but like look at the Billy Kincaid stuff. In the comic book, Billy Kincaid was murdered very violently. And in the,
Hmm.
the the animated series, I don't think he went out like that. You know what I mean? And then like some of the stuff with Overkill was a little bit different because I remember Overkill being a bit more over the top. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I'm sorry. I hate these. I hate these. I hate
but
these dudes so much.
I'm the characters like Cygor and
Yeah.
Overkill. I was
Okay,
cool with that.
I'm not gonna lie. I liked Cygor. I thought Cygor was pretty metal. I thought he was pretty cool. Like,
But
but yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, my bad. No, what I was gonna say though is like I feel like Spawn. Spawn is one of those things. You know how you like start up a car and it's like it wants to start and it wants to start,
Yeah,
but that's
I
what
get you.
Spawn is.
We're on the wave. We're on the
Yeah.
same wave. I understand. Yes.
But well, I mean,
It's
I also love Spawn. You know what I'm saying? I love Spawn a lot,
yeah.
but I also realize that Spawn at its best is still Spawn at its worst. Like, you know what I'm saying?
It's
Like,
it's 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 because it's it's just
it's
the
Todd.
unfortunate. Yes, 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 yes. Spawn's father is not a no disrespect to Todd McFarlane's
None
because
at all. I love Todd.
without him we would not have Al Simmons.
Without
What?
Todd McFarlane, you wouldn't have a lot of shit. You wouldn't have like the
Yeah.
little spaghetti webbing. You wouldn't have Venom. There's a lot of shit you don't get without. Honestly, and I feel like this needs to be mentioned in this video. And I feel like it's been said before. Todd McFarlane revolutionized action figure collecting, and we need to give this motherfucking
He also
man.
revolutionized, along with Neil Gaiman, but still, Todd McFarlane revolutionized independent comics also. Like
He,
Todd, like Image, if Image is its own brand of just independent comics that you can go to and you'll
hmm
find something great. All Image is like a film production company in that way, where
yeah,
you're getting all of these genres at once and it's something for everybody. For everybody. There's slice of life comics that Image makes. There's science fiction comics that Image makes. There's horror comics that Image makes. There are superhero comics that Image makes. So when
but
people talk about, oh, there's nothing, oh, it's just Marvel and DC, it's like it's not.
nah.
There are so many more comics out there. It's just that they don't have. There's a word that I found out what it was, and it was a video that I was watching about China and why they were like why China's pop culture can be I forgot there's a word for it, but it's pretty much a word that describes something that is an instant zeitgeist pop culture thing.
hmm
And how anime is over here and how Japanese culture has that place over here, or how Marvel and DC have their places. Image doesn't can't have that place.
It
Now,
it it
it
can, but my bad. Go ahead.
I would say it yeah, I would say because of shows like Invincible, it can get there, but and if Spawn is adapted correctly and Image's brand is really put out there, then yes. But at this point in time, I just feel like we're not there. I
So
think it's still very much Marvel DC. No one talks about. No one cares about anybody else.
but honestly, I think that's a part of a flaw in the framework of comics in general because comics are not accessible. It's just not an
Yeah.
accessible medium. You can't go anywhere and buy comics anymore. What really made Image thrive during the era where they first started, where they had so many shitty comic books selling millions and hundreds of thousands of copies, is that you, for one, the distributors were ordering a ridiculous amount of comic books. That's the first thing. Like they were ordering a shit ton of comic books for the collector's market, but also you could literally go anywhere and find a comic book. You could go to 7-Eleven, you can go to Ames. People probably like, what the fuck is Ames? You could go to fucking, you can go anywhere and buy comics. And a part of that included Image Comics, right? With Savage Dragon, Spawn, and all that shit like that. I remember I would go to the Safeway in the late 90s and I would find like Spawn comic books. I would go in fucking Barnes and Noble and Borders and it'd be like comics in there from various brands, mostly DC Image and Marvel, right? Because those are the three main forces as far as like distribution and the market share. But even still, those things exist. But I kind of want to speak to something else about Spawn because you mentioned Neil Gaiman, and I'm like, dog, like Spawn not being consistently great is weird because they had really great writers writing Spawn. They had Alan Moore writing Spawn. They had Neil Gaiman,
You had auteurs writing Spawn.
and not
And
that's
auteurs do not stay long.
well,
Like they don't. Like Marvel is, for example, Marvel will, and if an auteur does stay long, it's kind of like if they're not doing their own thing, you start to see eventually you'll start to see a bit of cracks, a little bit. But I feel like with these particular they don't want to stay long because they're just here to they're inspired by this character. They want to say what they want to say with him, but then they want to move on because they know these are comic legends. So they
yeah,
know that they'll get roped into that. Oh well, can you stay and do this? Can you keep doing that? Can you keep pushing that? And it's
I
like,
don't.
no, I want to
I don't.
do
I don't
this.
think. I don't think that's what happened with Neil Gaiman and Alan Moore. I think what happened is there were some contract issues and ownership rights issues, especially with like Neil Gaiman, that caused them to like start having beef and suing Todd McFarlane. That's another factor
Mm,
that led to like that really led to like because you had mentioned earlier about going on the website and looking for like Spawn action figures and finding like sports toys. That's a part of like Todd McFarlane had to drift away from Spawn stuff because he was getting a lot of lawsuits. He was getting sued by Neil Gaiman. He got sued by the hockey player Tony Twist. Like it was a lot of lawsuits that were coming out of Spawn, and it was affecting the way that he could promote and write and create with that character. But
okay.
but even still, he still had people. So a lot of people don't know this, but Brian Michael Bendis, right?
Yeah.
He got his start at Image right in Sam and Twitch. Like that was one of
Yeah.
his
Yeah. Yeah.
first. Yeah, in like the late 90s, early 2000. No, it had to be late 90s because he did Ultimate Spider-Man in the early 2000s. But yeah, like Brian Michael Bendis, he got his start like at Image. Same thing with Greg Capullo, who in my opinion, I know he's known for Batman, but I'm like, we gonna keep it a buck. Like Greg Capullo is the greatest Spawn artist ever,
Yeah, I
in
think
my
he's.
opinion.
I really feel like he's responsible for Spawn's whole just modern motif, his whole look, his whole general just feel is. I feel like very much Greg Capullo.
Bruh,
Just
like Greg Capullo and I know people like his Batman. I don't like Greg Capullo's Batman. I'm sorry, people. Fuck it. I am who I am. But his Spawn is perfect to me.
it's what I brought up to you earlier. I mean, a long time ago about how I felt that Spawn as because as a creator myself, I see every project, every character is kind of your child. And Spawn is one of those situations where Todd's kid has better mentors in his life than his own father. Like your
Well,
dad, I think that. I feel
well, no,
like
no, no.
other people have taken Spawn and done things with him. And I think that a lot of what Todd McFarlane is doing today with Spawn, as much as I like it, and I've talked to other people before who are also into Spawn too,
Mhm,
but as much as, and I've always expressed, as much as I like everything that's happening with Spawn right now, I love Gunslinger.
mhm.
He's not it's not Ed Kemper, it's a different guy, but I love Gunslinger. I love the concept of Gunslinger. That is, he is he is the underdog of this. He's so cool. He's such an underdog. He's such a practical dude, and I like him. He's dope. But it's just I love the Scorched. I love that she spawn is finally. I love all of it. I love that Al is more of a Batman type figure now than he is some scared guy that's always that's always in a fucking alley. And he's a much more proactive person. They gave Cyan her own
Yeah.
spinoff series. Like, I'm glad you're doing all of that. The
Shit.
problem is that you decided to do all of this with him too late.
30 years later.
Too
well,
late.
well. So
Yeah,
hold up.
all of the cool stuff that you introduced, yeah, they're back now. Oh, cool, we got medieval spawn. Oh, cool, Mandarin spawn's here. Oh, cool, all these characters are coming into play. But when they were relevant, you didn't care.
So
And now that they're not relevant, and I mean no disrespect, but as a Spawn fan, they're not relevant. Nothing
so
happening in Spawn is relevant.
but also you have to keep in mind though, Spawn was only really relevant for like 2 or 3 years. Like
No,
for
it's true. It's true. No, it is true. But at the same time, there's just like there's just so much that I'm happy exists. I'm happy that it can still keep going. I think that one of the only reasons Spawn is still going is because the head of Image Comics, that's his character.
yeah, as a
So it,
creator.
but I guarantee you, I'm sorry, it's the truth. I guarantee you, if Spawn was under someone else, not named Todd McFarlane, it would have ended a long time ago.
Well, I want to ask you this. Who do you think would be the greatest writer, or who do you think would take care of the character Spawn? Like who do you think what writer? You can even mention yourself and talk about ideas
No,
that you want to.
no, I don't have,
Okay.
I don't, I don't, I I would say, honestly, I don't know. I can't tell. Because it's a love-hate relationship with Spawn, because there are Spawn tales that are written by Tom McFarlane that I like.
Yeah.
There are Spawn stories by him that I like. There are Spawn stories by other writers that I like, but it's just that it's more so just the fact that there is Spawn is becoming, well, not really. I wouldn't say now, but I would say that Spawn is just, it's one of those he's one of those characters that, like I told you before, there's a malfunction in adaptation. There's something hard to get across with him.
So
And I don't I maybe it's the Superman effect, but in reverse.
so
You have an
I'm
all-powerful demon from hell who does not have a social life.
that so that
Bruce Wayne
that
has a social life.
those are things that could be repaired. But I personally,
They can be repaired. You're right. No, you're right. I agree with
but
that. Yeah.
so my personal, all right. So in terms of who I think would be someone that could handle Spawn the comic and a TV show, right? Very well. And please, like, just give me some grace here because I feel like this is gonna be a controversial take.
I
I
know you
think
better. I
Robert
know. Okay.
uh, Robert
Why?
Kirkman.
Okay. All right. Cool. Okay.
No,
Never mind.
you thought I was about to say Rob Liefeld.
I thought you were about to be like Baltimore.
You said who?
I thought you were about to say Baltimore.
No, no.
Oh, like, bro, no, not Vaudeville, not again. Like, because remember, we tried to. I told you about it when we the moment. It's funny because when we were doing our other video, when you mentioned Bo DeMayo, it's so messed up because as soon as we said that, immediately something came out about him. We were just like, God damn it.
So this is what's interesting about that too. Like I've been working on the X-Men 97 video essay. I've been working on that for like 3 months. And one of the things that has really held that video back is the stuff with Bo DeMaio. Cause it's like
Yeah,
I'm trying to figure out what to discuss with about him. And I follow him on Twitter and I sent him a message or two a couple months ago, not about anything like that, but just I try to pay attention actually. Like when I make video essays, that's actually the main skill that I implement. I try to pay attention because I think that's important because we're talking about properties that we don't write, right? So if we
yeah,
offering insight and discussing the lore and doing like critical analysis, you have to pay attention. But also, I feel like that's a thing that we learn as people that are writers because all writers are hyper fixated on something. Anybody that is
yeah.
a
To a
writer,
fault.
yeah, like you hyper fixate on things like dialogue and I'm not going to go on all of that, but
Well, but
um
why did you choose Robert Kirk?
because of two things, Invincible and The Walking Dead. And I feel like a great Spawn run is somewhere at the intersection of those two things. And I feel
I
like
like, yeah,
nobody has ever thought of that. Nobody has ever thought, well, somebody probably did, but the horror and the lore aspect of like walking it, but also the traditional comic book sensibilities of Invincible. If you cross pollinate or you intersect those two things and you put Spawn into that with all of the lore that Spawn has, with like dog, like you could make
yeah.
some really
You know, if the maybe it's also just Al needs a number. I mean, keep going. This is just all. This is all just speculative talk. Whatever. So it has nothing to do with where Spawn is now today. Just as just 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 saying. But if Spawn were to say have a new number one,
Mhm.
everything that's happened is no longer canon, and he has a new number one, a new canon going forward. I can see that, and we start out from the beginning. And
Without
and
my bad, I'm
with
sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say without the meter.
So I would
um,
actually I would keep the meter, but this is what I would do if I were to write Spawn, right? And give me grace with this because I'm piggybacking off of some ideas I've had for years. You keep the meter, but you justify the meter with something else. We start the story with Al Simmons. Al Simmons as a mercenary, but a mercenary with a heart condition. And he has kind of a like a little meter that regulates his heart and things like that. So that reference point is already there. So it's already established. And honestly, I wouldn't do the thing where like somebody murders Al Simmons straight up. I would actually make Al Simmons have a heart attack and die while under some stressful situation, so that when he dies and he goes to hell, it's like, damn, he must have did some real fucked up shit to go to hell, right? And he died from a heart attack from a broken heart, right? And that's like the recurring through line that like Al Simmons, the whole crux of his character is that he has a broken heart that needs to be healed. And the great
Yeah.
irony of that is him going to hell, making a deal with the devil to come back and visit Wanda, or get reestablish some shit with Wanda. Because let's say him and Wanda are estranged and she already moved on with Terry Fitzgerald while Al Simmons was alive. And that was a part of like his broken heart, right? And he comes back to try to figure out a way to recapture that love. And when he comes back, that's when the whole Spawn shit. It's the same story. We just changed some shit with the origin. We just changed some things with Al Simmons, right? Because to be honest, the first issue of Spawn is hokey as fuck. Because I'm reading this shit and I'm like, Al Simmons was like the man of the year Time magazine for being a fucking mercenary. Are you fucking really? Todd McFarlane,
Bro,
come the
when I
fuck on,
whenever
man.
bro, remember I told you I was going back and I was gonna reread Spawn and shit, and I told you, I called you, I think I called you like a day or two later, telling you just like I can't do it,
No.
I can't do it. It's so painful to get through. And I'm not even overreacting. I'm sorry, but it was so painful to just. It's like when you've read so many stories, comic book stories over the years, and then you go back to some older things or some not so great things, and it's
Yeah.
hard to get through because it's like, what? Huh? Why do you what? And I remember when you told me when I was telling you about how I hated the how Todd was set up like a whole exposition dump between
Mhm.
newscasters that you have to slit through and read through. And I'm just like, bro, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. I'm not about to do that. You could have just
But
expressed this through visual storytelling,
you
but you
he could
didn't.
he could have though. But and this is the other flaw of not just Spawn, but the early Image stuff, with the exception of maybe Savage Dragon. All of those comics are incredibly derivative. Savage Dragon is derivative too, but it's a better type of derivative because I feel like it borders more in a type of satirical
Yeah,
type of thing.
yes, I agree. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But like Youngblood and Wildcats and Spawn, all these fucking Batman, X-Men, Teen Titans knockoffs, but from like the '90s edgy shit, bro. That shit wasn't gonna thrive.
Well,
It just wasn't.
but see, that's the prop that's Spawn's first barrier. That I
Well,
think is the when I
the
is what
framework.
the framework of why there's a malfunction, because you have he is he is a diamond in the rough, but his diamond is still very edgy. There's still some crack. There's still a lot of edges that haven't been smoothed out yet,
The,
because
so
he's coming from an era. He's born of an era from the era that what you said. He's born from that mold, and
he,
even
yeah,
he's born from this very just this era that no longer.
it's Frank Miller,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
that's what those exposition dumps with the news reporters. That's from the Dark Knight Returns. That's all that shit is. Like that was Todd
He's
McFarlane.
very it's very extreme. It's there's a and we're no longer in the we don't superheroes no longer are extreme.
No,
Even the
not at
most
all.
extreme aren't extreme. Even somebody like the Batman Who Laughs isn't extreme, because eventually he becomes very cerebral. So it's like there's there's something there's something. It's like you see him, and that's why I understand. I get it why with the Spawn movie Todd McFarlane was like, okay, I want to make him just a force that you see. I want to make him a shadow. I want to make him uh this or whatever. And I want the story to focus more on Twitch, which
Mm,
was going to be played by Jeremy Renner,
Jeremy Renner,
which is
yeah.
very inspired casting. I hate, also for the record, and I don't care who hears this. I don't even care who Todd McFarlane hears this. I don't care. I hate Sam and Twitch. Every moment that Sam and Twitch is in my vision, I want them gone. I do not like this fat motherfucker and this skinny dude. I do not care for them. Never in my life. Granted, I will say that Twitch was very was very I like the way Twitch was written when Spawn was being resurrected and when things were happening and Twitch was kind of being used to usher a lot of things forward, and that's fine. I'm not but it's just I can't stand Salmon. I can't. And for him to come out of nowhere and say, "Oh, the story's going to be more revolved around Twitch," it really hurt because I felt like it was just like a tease to me. Because your story is it's called Spawn, and you need to have the story be about Al Simmons. If y- yes, people know the origin, whoever saw the movie, but this is a new generation of people. You can still do the origin and tell a full story. You can still do that. But I
You
think that
can,
this
yeah.
is how extreme Spawn is why that there was that hesitation. What I think is funny though is that the studios fought back against that idea and were like, well, he has guns and a cape and is in a black suit with green eyes and he has this and he looks cinematic. Why are we not pushing on to this? Why are we running away from this? And that's one of the first things I think you need to do to break that barrier that I'm talking about. You
Mm.
need to run into how operatic and mythological Spawn and larger than life Spawn is as a character and his world is. And once you make all of the things around him a lot more larger than life, once you because there is a mythology there.
Yeah.
Spawn has a mythology. Please do not make the mistake in assuming that the moment Redeemer showed up, the way Redeemer was created, is something mythological. The way Redeemer shows up is something mythological. The way Angela becomes who she becomes is something mythological. The way Spawn gains back his soul, then become one of the most powerful beings on the planet, is something mythological. And if you don't, but there's also something tragic. And if you don't play into that and you try to keep it Terra, I feel like there's something that's going to be lost in that. That's not to say you need to throw in overkill, but you need to establish characters around him. Kind of like how you said one of the problems with Man of Steel was that his supporting cast was missing.
Yeah.
And I think with
Yeah.
Spawn, you need a
Yeah.
strong supporting cast. You need a strong supporting cast around him. You need him to be a strong character. What makes Al Simmons unique is that and it is and I'm not trying to and this is I'm not trying to get all metaphysical or whatever, but it to me as just true. Al Simmons is and we're just saying this as comic book fans, but more specifically as Black American comic book fans who grew up in urban environments where places where Al Simmons is actually from. This is a person who, on the outside, looks like the most dangerous to other people. May view him as the most dangerous, scariest person that they could run into in a dark alley. But Al is a sweetheart. He is
Well,
reluctant to
it's
kill. There's a reason why he was drawn. There's a reason why Alex Ross drew him holding Cyan,
I
protecting
think
her. There's a reason why him and Cyan are always seen together sometimes in many beautiful art. It's because this is a person who, like you said, is heartbroken. Paul is a constantly heartbroken, melancholy that's character, more so than Batman. Spawn weeps more than Batman weeps.
I think
And
oh my
it's
bad,
one
go
of the
ahead. I'm
reasons
sorry.
why they complement it's one of the reasons why Spawn and Bruce complement each other is because of what they both represent. But it's just behind if you look at Spawn the way we look at Batman, because they both are two sides of the same coin in a lot of ways, you are looking at someone who, like you said, is heartbroken, someone who suffers from a broken heart, someone who feels that the answer is violence. And once he finally has the answer and realizes it's not the answer, he's stuck with violence. And now he has to navigate this super hyper masculine world of violence. And he has to be the steady hand. And that's all, especially in this animated series, that's all Al ever kind of became was someone who, at the end of the day, he no longer wanted to commit harm.
That's very true.
Even when Al killed himself, he was in it. Al was in an alley. He turned his powers on himself and then he blew his head off. But before he did that, he was just like, no more. I'm done. I'm sick of it. I don't want it. I don't want any more of this. And I think that
Well,
you need to play into that. It's kind of the same thing with it's one of the it's kind of like Neon Genesis Evangelion in a way, where Shinji is the character who it's who the audience is like, it should be your dream to have this, but Shinji's like, no, this is not. This is terrible to me.
I
And
I
with Spawn, I
oh,
think it kind of has to be that way for a little bit at least.
what I wanted to say too is that I think we're forgetting one major part of like why people like characters. They're aspirational. That's why people like superheroes. And Spawn, the way he's written sometimes, it's not very aspirational. And I think that's the major disconnect. Nobody wants to be Spawn. Like everybody wants to be
He
Batman,
don't even want to be
even though
himself.
yeah, exactly, right? But Spider-Man, everybody wants to be Spider-Man. Everybody wants to be Captain America. You know what I mean? With Spawn, the real flaw of the character is that he is not aspirational. Now you
He
could
also
do,
has no sense of humor.
I mean, yeah,
He has
no.
no
Well,
sense of
hold up,
humor.
hold up. No, in the animated series, he had a sense of humor. He was very sardonic. He had a sense of humor. In the comic, yeah, not so much. But even Michael Jai White Spawn was sardonic. Like I felt now
Yeah,
Spawn has a sense of humor.
yeah.
It
He
it
can. It's there. It's there. It's there. It's not out, but it's there.
it's so the this is the main flaw with Spawn, and I really feel like we need to hammer home on this point. He is not an aspirational superhero at all, and it's not because of the powers or the whatever the fuck. It's really because Spawn never gets to be glorious. You know what I mean?
No.
Like Batman is dark and brooding, but Batman gets to be glorious.
And
Um,
even when Spawn becomes glorious, there's always this. There's even the moments where he has been quote unquote glorious. It wasn't for the celebration of it. There was always a darker reason or dark undertone of like, this is not good.
Yeah, so when you look at Spawn the movie, and I don't know the last time that you saw that movie, but I actually saw that movie in the theaters when it came, like the weekend that shit came out. And I remember kind of being like like, this is cool,
Mhm.
but really enjoying the way that Michael Jai White played that character because Michael Jai White played him with rage and loneliness, but he was also somebody that seemed to revel in the power that he was gaining. And
Okay,
you you
I want you to stay on that for a moment.
go ahead, yeah.
I think that this is the one of the flaws too, though. It's that Michael Jai White's rendition of Spawn grew out of that dark place and became proactive.
Yeah.
In the comics, Spawn does not become a he he he's not proactive for a very long time, and it's kind of to a fault. A lot of
That
things happen
yeah.
to him, and he's not really out there. There's not a there's no he needs to there's no proactivity with him. But
There
that's the nature of the medium, though. That's because you got 2 hours.
it it
you
it
know.
it, it is, but it's something with the structure. It's something when actors bring these characters to life because Keith David Spawn was also enjoyable to watch. And that's why I'm
Yeah.
like, I think Jamie Foxx would be an interesting Al Simmons because I'm like, dog, it's Jamie Foxx. The only other motherfucking black dude under the age of like 60 that make action movies that's charismatic is Will Smith, and we can't do Will Smith as Spawn. That ain't gonna work. But um I think that's really the main flaw of that character because when you look at all of these other independent comics, even if you look at the real character that runs more adjacent to Spawn than Batman, Wolverine, Wolverine is
Mm.
just a fucking fun ass character. With all of
Yeah.
his darkness, with all of his government experimentation and
There's
lost
still fun
loves,
there.
yeah, and also
Yeah.
technically you can make the argument that there's an aspect of Wolverine that's like a walking zombie because he's like 200 fucking years old and shit. And you know what I'm saying? It's a lot of parallels, but I feel like Wolverine is Spawn done right. But
Mm.
Spawn is such a different character than Wolverine aesthetically, but thematically they're very similar. And I feel like if you're gonna make a Spawn anything, right, comic, movie, cartoon, whatever, I think you need to draw from the best parts of what works with Wolverine. You have a character who, once again, victim of government experimentation. If we're looking at Spawn, Spawn is a victim of spiritual experimentation and manipulation and things like that. And that
Well, no,
plays
no,
on,
well, also Spawn is also a part. Spawn is a part of a form of a Weapon X program.
yeah, that's the point of, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And
literally.
yeah, and Malboja is Dr. Cornelius, right? From Weapon
Yeah.
X, right? But with Spawn, and I think the flaw that Todd McFarlane had is that, hey, he's an artist. He's not a writer. Writers understand character. You have to understand character to write character. And understanding character isn't necessarily the same thing as understanding people in real life. If I feel like you know what I mean by what I say, because what it takes to craft an interesting character isn't really the same thing that you get from like a person, because there's people out there in the world
Well,
that are
because
uninteresting as fuck, right? But then
it's
there are people who just have a natural charisma and a thing about their character that draws them in, right?
well,
And,
well. And I was gonna say, well, it's because of the nature of the medium. So if you have 2 hours to tell a story, you need to entertain your audience. And when you need to, by entertaining your audience, you have to have a character that is fleshed out, that starts from the middle, from the beginning, the middle, and the end, which means that they're going to go through a faster character growth and a faster character arc than reality would stipulate. So you're getting all of your dopamine hits and all of your payoffs within that moment. If the film is good and if you like it, which is subjective, but within the medium of film or even within the medium of television, especially if you have an ending in mind, and sometimes in television your characters remain in stasis for the point because it's television. But
yeah,
if you have a television show where there's an ending in mind and there is character growth, you're going to see character growth on a fixed plane, as opposed to in reality you don't see character growth on a fixed plane. You see it everywhere. It's scattered. One day a man can answer for his crimes, the next day he'll go. And but the problem is it's not going to take 2 hours for you to answer for things or for you to get around to believing yourself again, or sometimes it takes years. So in the context of a film, uh it takes that short amount of time to hit all those dopamine hits and to get across the story that needs to be conveyed. So it's easier, I think, for which is something that I think it's easier for a
well,
character like Spawn to live in that medium. If you notice, he's really taken off with the animated TV show. that
so
that show had a resurgence.
I mean, it did, but I want to push back against that because, and I might be misinterpreting what you're saying, because I feel like comics is a perfect medium to build
No,
character
no, no,
because
no, no. Yeah, yeah, no,
what,
no. Comics,
what
but the way it was executed in on his behalf
yeah.
is what I'm talking about.
No, no, I get that. So you're right about that, right? But once again, I think what it really boils down to is that with the motherfucker, like with Spawn, right? I feel like I keep saying it, with Spawn is that, yo, this motherfucker is a very derivative character, but the characters that he's derived from are better versions of him. Like
Yeah, yeah,
Spawn is a hybrid of Venom, Batman, and Wolverine and the Punisher. And Spawn is not more interesting than any of them other motherfuckers. You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
There are also splashes of Moon Knight in Spawn, and Spawn isn't more interesting than
You,
that.
you
But
know,
that's not that character's fault, right? It's the writer. And I'll give you a prime example of why it doesn't really matter who creates a character. What matters is who gets their hands on a character. And that's the
yeah,
teenage motherfucking Ninja Turtles. The Ninja Turtles, as created by Eastman and Laird, on the surface, pretty fucking shallow, right? There's not a lot going on underneath the hood of those characters. But once you started getting other creators to recontextualize the Ninja Turtles, they started to become iconic. And that's what's missing from Spawn. Spawn never got to become iconic because nobody iconic put their hands on Spawn. Now, there's layers to that, right? Because technically you could say the animated series, but the animated series was really far more underground than anything. It was like a
yeah. It was.
secret. even though it won Emmys, that's I think like 2 seasons, won Emmys. It was critically acclaimed and shit like that. I have the special edition DVD of that series. I used to watch this shit every day for like 2 years. But
I
the fact
torrented it.
that you said what?
I, uh, I watched it when it was airing, but then like years later, I would torrent it
No,
offline.
like I'm, you know me, I buy shit. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So because I for the commentary and the special features and shit. But like,
yeah.
um, nobody iconic has gotten their hands on Spawn, and I feel like in order for Spawn to truly become an iconic character, you need people that not only understand what's wrong with Spawn, but also what's right with Spawn. Because we're talking about a lot of what's wrong with Spawn, but there's also a lot that's very
No,
right with that character.
I
Like,
agree. That I agree. I 100% agree.
and I kind of want to circle back to what you were saying about Sam and Twitch, right? And even characters like Overkill. I think those characters are perfectly fine within the mythos of Spawn because because we know we've been friends for like over a decade. I know your preference is very horror, and those are not horror characters. But I think what's
Well, it's
beautiful about what I just want to say this. Hold up. What's beautiful about Spawn is that it was the thing we were talking about earlier with Batman, where Batman is malleable because he fits into various genres. And honestly, Spawn is a character like that. Spawn can be a horror comic, it can be a superhero comic, it can be fucking sci-fi. Spawn can be a lot of different things. And I think by removing characters like Sam and Twitch and Overkill and even Cyborg goofy ass from that like framework, I think you stifle Spawn and keep him only in that tragic kind of realm. That's why I like characters like Overkill because they make Spawn fun. Whether or not they're written well, that's not those characters' fault. It's the fault of the creators. And
I will
Spawn,
say
oh my bad, go ahead. Yeah.
no. I was gonna say that. I'll say yeah. No, it is.
Oh,
It is not that I am 100% against those characters, but I am kind of I am kind of turned off by how those characters
we're written.
are. Yeah, like
Yeah.
it's just there's not I'm not interested in them. It's just the truth. I'm not,
No,
which
yeah,
is funny
that's
because
fair.
they it's not that I don't think that they have something to say. It's just that I don't think, like you said, the whoever really had them had nothing to say. And
Yeah.
while yeah, Spawn can be all of those things, it's it's it it. I wanted to circle back to something that I had mentioned earlier.
Hmm.
When I started collecting a lot more Spawn, and like I said, I love characters like the Gunslinger. And when I was
Mm.
reading Gunslinger's solo series, it really hit me. I was like, this is everything I wanted Spawn to be. Because Gunslinger is the other thing about Al Simmons, and what I mentioned this before, he suffers from the Superman effect too. He's Spawn, when people are like, "Oh, who can win, Spawn or such and such?" I'm sorry, but there's a high chance that Spawn can win. Spawn is too is he is ultra powerful, especially
Hmm.
Spawn is a very powerful character. That's one of the reasons why that limiter was there. But
Yeah.
once the can once they wrote out the limiter and told and was like, "No, Al is like the 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 apex predator of the supernatural." Like the angels and demons are afraid of him. It's like he's supposed to be the new king of hell. It's like there's this he's so ultra. He's so ultra. And
Extreme.
yeah, and Gunslinger is none of those things. Gunslinger has to coat his bullets in his own blood to shoot and kill demons.
Mm.
Gunslinger bleeds. Gunslinger gets hurt, like hurt. And it's like Al was that was happening to Al too. I'm not saying it wasn't, but eventually Al just became, and it's like how, but it's like, but at the same time, it's like, how can you do that? Because look at this larger than life character,
Mm.
and it's one of those things where I'm just think a lot of it just has to do with, like I said, you swing into it.
Yeah.
You swing into it. You have to, and a character like I feel like if you adapt. like you said, the good things throughout the entire series, because it doesn't just have to be from Spawn. It can be from any version of Spawn. It can be
Yep.
from any Spawn, any iteration, any standalone story, any action figure from Spawn. Like all of those things can come together to create something else. Spawn has a plethora of villains that you can choose from now that don't
Yeah.
have to just be. Now you can do. I forgot the. I can't believe. Jason Wynn.
Jason. Yeah.
So Jason Wynn was Redeemer.
Yeah.
You could do that. You could have Jason Wynn be Redeemer, not in the first Spawn, because I told you, like, I think a long time ago when I told you, if I had to do a Spawn, movie, I would want the villain to be Chapel, because of the connection that him and Al had.
They
But
can't do that no
they
more.
can't. Yeah, you told me they can't do Chapel, so I was like, well, shit, I don't. But now in my mind, I'm like, well, just all right, we'll just do the Violator brothers. Don't do Violator, but do the rest of them. Do the rest of them as villains, and
You know
do
what?
something like that. Like you got to start getting into the nitty gritty, which I kind of think they might do with the new movie. But
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
I said, the good things about Spawn are he does have larger than life villains. There is something very cinematic about this character if you do it right. Even in the movie, the live action movie, there were things there visually that I liked. Primarily, it was mainly um one, when Violator transformed, I thought that was cool. Although the animated series did it way better.
Woo.
because
Yo.
because if I'm not mistaken, I saw the movie first, then the animated series. So I'm expecting, if you saw the movie first and you're expect the way Violator turns to Violator in the movie, it's like, all right, so he's gonna do this in the animated series. And the way he does it in the animated series, I'm not gonna lie, that shit fucked up me. That shit fucked me up, because it proved it hammered home that, bro, Clown is not some this is not a random dude who's just fat and talking shit. This is a threat. This person needs to be eliminated. This is a villain. This man was in the shit. They had Violator fucking crouching down like a monk. He was in the corner. That big ass thing in the corner, crouched down, bro. And then the way he talked, he wasn't talking like that in the movie. I was new to all of this. They
Oh
made him.
wow.
They made his talking. They made him talking whispers, because of
Yeah.
course he talking whispers. He's a demon. I'm like, it's like all of these things. I'm like, of course, of course. It's just epiphany after epiphany after epiphany watching that scene. I love that scene when you
No,
meet
that shit was
Violator for the
perfect.
first time and he knocks some sense into Al. He was like, "You're not talking shit to me. You're not in charge. I am in charge.
You know what?
You need to do what's told of you." And it's
I
like, it's so funny because it harkens back to the fact that Al is someone who has always, which is another good point that you could add when you're adapting Spawn. Al is another character flaw. Al is somebody who has always taken orders, and now has even given up his soul to once again take orders. And in your death, you finally realize that you need to stop taking orders, because when you take orders, terrible things happen to people, and that's always been your life.
well, yeah. I
And
mean,
you're a mercenary, dude. You're not in charge of yourself. You were never in charge of yourself. And I
honestly,
think that Spawn should, if you're doing this adaptation of Spawn, you need to focus on the idea of fuck the superheroics, fuck the powers, the chains, and all that stuff, which is cool. But in the center of it needs to be about a man who is rising out from a dark place in his life, the dark pit of his life, because it has to be something everyone can relate to. That is somebody who's rising from a dark place in their life and is taking charge of their life and taking power in their life. Do something good when they've done a lot of bad. Because Spawn, also, the reason for his melancholy, you have to also think about, is that this is somebody who doesn't, in reality, Al Simmons doesn't really, he belongs in hell if you believe in such things.
yeah.
Al Simmons belongs where he went. You don't want that man. He was dangerous before he was spawned. He was Al Simmons is a serial killer. He was dangerous before he was spawned. He was already dangerous.
And see,
So go ahead.
no, I was just saying, and see things like that. That's what I find interesting about Spawn. That like he was already a cold-blooded killer before.
Yeah.
Like in fact, him being a cold-blooded killer is what led him to his path. And I
Yes.
think that's why I was saying like the whole premise of like Spawn, like the if I were to write Spawn like a comic or a movie or whatever and start it at one, yeah, I would start with him being like a soldier with a broken heart with PTSD and all of these like emotionally stunted things because like in the comics they make him into like this lover boy type of character. I'm gonna be 100% honest, and I know this will be very controversial for me to say. I would actually, as far as the Al and Wanda story, I would actually make their relationship dysfunctional. And when Al dies, that's why he wants to come back to redeem himself to Wanda. Because
Yeah.
that like I
It
get the
has
whole
to be
like
real. It has to be realistic. Not
yeah,
realistic to the point of serious dysfunction, but you could. It
no,
doesn't
I
have
would
to
no,
be abuse. But it's
no,
the fact
I
that
would
I
have
mean,
no, I would have him be abusive to her, but not like malicious. Like I would have like maybe flashbacks of like he might have hit her once or whatever like that because it also it forces you to do something else. Make a sympathetic character likable because I feel like that's how you write a good Spawn story. This man is a killer. This motherfucker is a murderer. Then
he
you add
has to.
another.
He has to add to your point. You're absolutely right because it shows in his outfit. He has to wear this. This is
It,
who
it,
he is. He has
it,
to
it's
wear this as punishment for who he's been. This suit
yeah,
is who you are.
yeah,
The cape is alive. You're not even in control of the cape. Like the cape is alive. You got scars on you, bro.
but
You look like you are the epitome of everything that you were in life.
yeah, but and to add on too, like I
You
said,
don't even
I
have
would go,
pupils in your eyes. You have no
yeah,
soul.
I would go full fledged, make Al, dysfunctional, verbally, emotionally, physically abusive towards Wanda, but still, you know,
I don't. That's the only. I would make him emotionally abused. I don't want to. I don't want him to be physically. And like you said, yeah, it could be the accident. It could be an accident, but I don't want it. I wouldn't want it to be on purpose.
I would,
I don't think he would ever. Just knowing what I know about
but
him, I don't think he'd ever hit her. As
but
much as
this
he
is all,
loves her,
but this is also so. The domestic abuse is a very interesting thing because I don't advocate domestic abuse at
no, I
all.
understand. I
Like
understand.
that's what I'm
Yeah, no,
using.
you're in the
The re
workshop. I get it.
yeah, this is a character, and I think
Yeah,
sometimes in this era we're so scared to make fictional characters do realistic things. People are abusive in real life. Writing an abusive character doesn't mean that you advocate for it. It means that you're creating a character and you're creating an opportunity for a character to grow and evolve. That's my issue with Al Simmons. Al Simmons at the start of the Spawn comic is a golden boy. And it's like, y'all made a motherfucking mercenary the fucking Time Magazine Man of the Year. That's fucking ridiculous. That's
yeah,
stupid. Make
weird.
him a piece of shit.
First of
Make
all,
him a fucking
if he was on Time Magazine, if he was a mercenary on Time Magazine, he's getting somebody's gonna get him up out of there. Because why are you out and talking? Why
yeah.
why are you
That's what I'm
out
like.
talking?
You know what I'm saying? And I'm not one of those people that's like on some like, oh man, like political correctness. No, but at the same time, I feel like we need to be able to take true risks with these characters. When I say making him abusive, I don't mean like he on his I turn and shit, but I'm like,
Yeah,
if he's somebody that's not in control of his emotions, that's dealing with PTSD. What's the movie with Tobey Maguire and Jake Gyllenhaal?
brothers.
Where that shit, yeah, that's Al Simmons should be like that.
Yeah,
He should be like Tobey Maguire's character in that movie, a person who you could tell he's a good person, but he's also fucked up because he's been in war. War
yeah.
does not create civil human beings. War
And
creates trauma.
which segues into our next point about Spawn is that he is and can be relevant. Because what is the most relevant thing today, if not war?
Well, war is
If
always going to be relevant. War is
right, but I'm talking about in particular just today in general, what's in people, what's in the zeitgeist, what's always been in the zeitgeist, of course, is war, but it's just that's something that no one's it just feels like these wells are just wells that are sitting. They're like a lot of aspects of Spawn's character are just oil wells that have not been struck because there's either a heavy focus on the darkness or there's a heavy focus on the superheroics, but there's never an in between meeting that
That,
happens, you know?
that's true. And so, and I want to say this too to kind of circle back to my like the crafting of my version of Al Simmons. The reason I'm mentioning these things is because when the Luke Cage TV show came out, they did something with Luke Cage that I find very problematic that they do with a lot of black characters. They try to sanitize them and make them digestible for a mainstream audience. And I feel like the only way these characters can really work is if you take risks with these characters and make them
Yeah.
believable people. You know what I mean? And it,
Especially in 2024, you or
yeah, it's
going forward, you got to take risks. You got to do something different.
yeah, and it's
Uh,
like yeah, like making Spawn. You could, what's more edgy than Spawn having PTSD and being a piece of shit that has to rise up above that? That's the
Yeah.
real character arc. It's not the fucking the meter and the fucking shit with Malboja. It's the humanity of this character. That's what's really missing from a lot of Spawn media is they don't make this motherfucker a human being. What really worked about the animated series versus the comic is that the whole point of Al Simmons in the animated series was that he was trying to recapture his humanity, either
Yeah.
through love or just through fucking being a fucking human being again. That he
Yeah.
even mentions that in the fucking TV show. In the last episode, I think he's like, I want my humanity back. And I'm like,
Mhm.
why are we not leaning into that part of Spawn? You got a demon man that's a superhero that don't want to be a demon man superhero, but also somebody
It
who really wants his humanity.
it speaks for it tells itself. It tells itself, but for some reason there's no movement
There's
because I
no
just want to yeah, I just feel like I'm gonna be real. I think the people in charge of all of it is just they're ill equipped. And
there
I can't fully say that because I'm not in the industry, of course. But it's just from an outside looking in, it's like this to me, this is a no-brainer. To me, this
yeah.
character is a no-brainer. That he's there because he's so larger than life, because he's so derivative, he's perfect to be molded however you need to mold him to make him work. Because there's enough about him that works to where you can fix all the other stuff in
Yeah.
the progress. You can fix all the other stuff in the shop when you're working on it. You can fix everything, all that stuff. It's
Hmm.
right there for you. You can
Yeah.
fix it. You can't it you can still have a layered three-dimensional character who has fears, who has traumas, who grows and still have him whipping his chains out, fighting people, and fighting gorilla dudes, fighting Malboja, fighting Redeemer, and still have it look cool. It can still be cool. Cool does not have to also equal devoid of uh substance. You know, it can still be cool and have substance.
I mean,
And I think that
something being cool is usually something with substance, and that's the
yeah,
ironic thing. Like most times, where like movie franchises that are like long running and characters that are long running, when the substance isn't there, those characters aren't cool. I give you a prime example: the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I stand on this to this day. That first Ninja Turtles movie is a fucking masterpiece of a comic book movie because it's the only fucking Ninja Turtles movie that treats those characters as human fucking beings. Everything else is like a shell of those characters. You know what I'm saying? Pun
well,
intended, I guess.
it
You
goes
know what I
back
mean?
to what I it goes back to all of this goes back to what and I bring it up a lot, but it's true. It's what I heard Steven Spielberg say about when he was being interviewed for this monster movie documentary about like I think it was called It Came from the 50s or It Came from the 60s. I think there's a series, but it was
Hmm.
called It Came from the 50s. I think it was either It Came from the 50s, Came from the 40s, one of the two. Anyway, um, And when they were interviewing Steven Spielberg, he brought up a good point of like when in films like them, the giant ants, when you have these characters seeing this larger than life shit, they're taking it seriously. They're treating it with the respect and credence it deserves, because you have to, when it's because these characters, this is their world. This is their real world. So when you see the giant ant, or in this case, you see the 6'5" spirit demon holding a shotgun, that's real to you. And because that's real to those characters, that particular larger than life figure has to also have reality to them too. That's
Hmm.
also have dimensions to them too. Because if they don't, it's the same there's a reason why people weep for King Kong, because there is that those there are those dimensions to his character, of how he starts and where he ends up. And you have to look at Spawn that way too, of you have to look at where he starts and where he ends up. Spawn,
Hmm.
because Al cannot go back to being human. That's not happening. That breaks the rules of his world. He can't go back to being human. He's stuck who he is with who he is. He can turn back into Al Simmons, of course, but Spawn can turn into anybody. He can turn back to himself, but we know that he is now, it's kind of like Batman. Simmons is the mask, but you are Spawn. You can be Al Simmons all you want, but you know you can't go back to that, because Al Simmons didn't have the powers of hell. Al Simmons didn't have demons and angels coming for him every single moment of his life. That's another thing too. This is a character who defies both aspects of religion. These are
That's
there are so
yeah.
many layers that you have to, and and I know people, and people will be like, oh well, it's not that deep, or you're bringing this into it, bringing that into it. I'm just like, you have to understand, to be a storyteller, to be a for comic book writers, for novelists, for screenwriters, for writers in general, if you do not take the world in as your inspiration, what the fuck are you saying?
Well,
Nothing.
the, there's
So
also my bad. I'm
you
sorry. Go
have
ahead.
so you have to take in everything. You have to take in what a character like Spawn represents. And also Spawn is still this is a fresh character. Still, I still think Spawn is a very fresh character, in
Spawn is
terms of just
timeless.
he's this is a black hero in a space where black people are not, which is supernatural in horror. And you are the hero. You are the, like I said, apex predator.
Not only
And
that,
that's to me personally, that's bigger than Black Panther to me, because you are someone who would, and it's not a competition. I want everyone to eat. I like Black Lightning, so
yeah,
I'm just saying, but not the TV show, but just the character.
TV show
But
was cool. But yeah.
but I hated the outfit. But
Oh yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just a
Yeah.
it's just a character like Al Simmons and this is just me as a young boy who grew up liking him. To see someone like that being on top for all of his flaws, it's kind of like the same thing when I told you when we were at that panel at that one convention, and I brought up the fact that I don't like when black people feel like black person has to be a hero. And
Yeah.
like, you need black villains. You
Hmm.
need black people who are every type of flaw, because we're human. We're not special fucking seeds that you put. No, we're just as human as everybody else. So you need to be written like you're just as human as everybody else, with no fucking exceptions. So if Al Simmons is the type of person that will most likely be one of those soldiers who had to gun down a kid, I guarantee you that's who he is. That's who Al Simmons was. The same thing how people can watch that American Sniper Bradley Cooper movie or whatever, a guy like him, it's the same thing with a character like that.
Well,
It's these flaws make you human.
the,
And
the,
it's funny too, and not to belabor the point, but when you mentioned that Al wanted his humanity back, he has it. That's actually the the twist to him. You're a monster who has humanity. You still have your humanity, because if you didn't have your humanity, you wouldn't have defied Malboja. You wouldn't have fought against Clown. You wouldn't have fought against all of hell for love. You would not have done that, because no one human does that. I mean, no inhuman person does that.
So
You did it though.
there's another interesting aspect to Spawn that I'm so surprised we never spoke about this, but there's a religious aspect to Spawn that I find very interesting because it's a black man fighting a satanic cult. And I'm like,
Yes.
you've also never seen that because like the whole premise of Malbolgia and or like their version, it comes from like what is it, Dante's Inferno and like the eight realms or the eight layers of
Done.
hell. Yeah, right. So black people, our people, very infatuated with Christianity and the church and spirituality and all of that. And Spawn is literally a character whose whole mythos is bathed in that. But I don't, you might be able to answer this, but is Al Simmons agnostic, Christian, atheist? I feel like
Simmons,
he
Al Simmons, well, one, okay, if we're speaking story world wise, it's kind of impossible for Al Simmons to be an atheist, because I mean, you met God.
yeah, exactly, yeah.
You met God, you met the devil, you fought God, you fought the devil.
And it became an angel.
So yeah, so it's like he's not that. I just think that Al knows it's kind of how it was described in the TV show, and it's described, honestly, Todd McFarlane also describes it in the series, in the books. It's just that heaven and hell are nothing but corporations, man. They're two
That, that
corporations. That's it.
that's true, and that's what I'm saying. But so prior to him dying, I feel like Al Simmons was an atheist though, and
Yeah, no,
then
I'm sure. I feel like he'd be an atheist. Yes,
because
I
I
don't think
feel
he'd
like
be
that was
agnostic.
mentioned. I feel like that was mentioned. So, and the reason I'm mentioning that, right, because you had mentioned things about like black characters, and you said like you said it's very rare that black characters are like used in like kind of a spiritual or like horror type of component. And I'm like, dog, when the last time you seen like a black superhero deeply embedded in Judeo Christianity and mythology like that? You know what I'm saying? Like that's a thing that you dog like Spawn is actually a pretty deep character because it's it's bathed in all of this racial subtext that nobody ever talks about. You got the
It's
stuff,
also the fact that Spawn is a lineage. It's not just Al Simmons. It is
yeah.
a number of people throughout all of human history who have who have worn this burden. But what makes Al Simmons special, what makes him the chosen one, is that he, out of all of the other hell spawns, Al is the one who defied
So
the powers that be,
yep,
and
and so
they feared him for it. That's why I said that while Al feels like he's trying to find his humanity, what he doesn't realize, which is something that I think you could hammer home in a series or a movie or whatever, is that what he comes to realize is which is something I think is very relatable for us as human beings, is that you can have all the scars you carry. You can carry all the scars you want, but that doesn't stop you from being human.
it
If you're still trying, you're human. You're not a monster. If you're still trying. And Al is someone who, despite everything, is still trying.
he definitely is. And so I want to talk about the racial component of Spawn though, because once again, that's not a thing that I rarely hear people discuss the racial. It's not even subtext to me. It's metatext. It's surface text. You have a black man who's caught up in the military industrial complex, something that historically black people have been a victim of. And I find that so very interesting because the military industrial complex in the Spawn franchise, as it relates to Al Simmons, exists in two capacities. It exists in a tangible government sponsored military industrial complex, and then it exists in a spiritual, religious, framework. And Al Simmons is literally a rebel fighting against the spiritual religious version of the military industrial complex as a black man. And I'm like, that is incredibly fucking deep and profound.
Yeah. Um, it's something that I just feel like is is is
It's understated, and it's understated because the racial aspects of Spawn are not discussed in that capacity. It's discussed in this very kind of like um I would say honestly, it's discussed from a white perspective because you don't see a lot of black people doing media analysis for a character like Spawn. So when you look at like characters like Jason Wynn, who represents the establishment, who is a very clear and present, obvious white man running the military, who exploits Al Simmons, and then he gets sent to
pause
hell. Oh, my bad, go ahead.
pause 1 second.
Yeah.
I'll be right back. We're just gonna edit this part out.
Okay.
All right, hold on. I'll be right back. Yeah, as soon as they called, you made a good fucking point about the military industrial complex, and I was like, "Fuck."
It's all good. We can like resume it because I could chop this up. So this
Okay.
you're good. But
Okay. So what we so could you do you remember what you said?
no, I already talked about the military industrial complex. What I was talking about is the religious symbolism of Spawn, like in
Yeah.
a black man being like a force of nature within a superhero comic that's deeply connected to religious symbolism. And I find that to be a very interesting aspect of Spawn that doesn't get discussed because, as I've mentioned before, media analysis of certain aspects of black entertainment is constantly ignored. Once
Yeah.
again, and I'm really, really not saying this to be obnoxious. I feel like I am the only person that has ever really went in depth about the class and racial subtext layers, whatever the fuck about Blade, right? And now we have a similar thing with Spawn, who is this very
Well, you said no because I'm glad you brought that up because it rung exactly what you said that I remembered. And once again, I'm also not trying to be obnoxious about this, but it's true, and this is a fact that we have to speak about. Spawn and characters like Spawn and Blade are not looked at through a black lens,
nope, nope.
and it's weird because and it's like they're not looked at through a black lens, and that's why you get comments like, "Don't y'all got Black Panther? Couldn't you like Black Panther?" And it's like you don't for you to say that is so weird to me because you're not taking into account that I am an American and I can't relate and I'm not saying I can't relate to Black Panther, but to tell me that there's only Black Panther because he's from Africa is insane. It's insane.
It,
Super
it,
insane. When
it
so when we are more than just we're more than just that, especially now. So it's
well,
like just think that I just think that when and it's no offense to them at all, but when fans who are not of those particular that of especially black American fans or especially white American fans or whatever, when you look at characters like Blade and Spawn, you're not seeing what we see, and it's okay. But but don't get offended when we express that we see something a bit different than you,
well,
because we there are things that make those characters stand out for us that's unique to us because we don't get it. We don't.
yeah,
We're not in those spaces. And it's not
and
we're not it's not that we're not allowed in those spaces, but there's no voice for us. There's no room for us. There's no room made. We got to make our own room. And even when you make your own room, you still have to there are people who still have to come to that. And then you have to challenge you're challenging different zeitgeists now. So it's like when you
yeah.
have a character like Blade, when you have a character like Spawn that already exist and have this foundation and have this upliftment, the trade-off is that they're not going to be seen through a black lens.
And once again, they're not seeing. So they're seeing a. So the black lens is there, but the black lens isn't given a lot of nuance and it's not given a thorough analysis because
Right.
mass media analysis and media criticism and media studies in general, it's not a space where black intellect is very welcome or embraced. I say that as somebody who writes very thought-provoking shit on the internet about comics and movies and shit like that, and I'm definitely fucking I'm not Lindsay Ellis, right? I'm not, you know what I'm saying? I'm not like that at that level. And I probably never will be because that's not what people are looking for. And a lot of what goes on now with the way algorithms work, it's 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 a popularity contest. And the idea of discussing the racial, religious layers of Spawn, it's not popular unless somebody is who is white or somebody who's popular is doing it. And in comics, right? I find Spawn to be very interesting because Spawn actually led the charge of a series of black superheroes that came out that hold very little commodity anymore, with the exception of maybe one that I'll mention. And when I mention him, you're like, oh yeah, that guy. But Spawn came out in 1992, right? The following year, 1993, Milestone Media dropped. And then you got Hardware, which nobody really knows who Hardware is. That's not a popular character, right? But then you get Icon, who moderately popular, and Rocket, moderately popular under the radar, right? Then you
Hmm.
get Static, right? Who I think that was the third title launch from Milestone. Static is very, very popular. But the thing about Static is up until maybe 7 years ago, most people who watched that cartoon with Static, they did not know he was from a fucking comic book. They thought that that was some shit that they just made up for black kids for like
Yeah.
Saturday morning cartoons and shit like that. And I think that's bad. But also the other black superhero that came out was a character called Mantis. And Mantis didn't have a comic book. Mantis was a TV show character created by Sam Raimi from the Spider-Man movies and Sam Hamm, who wrote the first Batman movie. Right. And I'm like, there was this whole black superhero renaissance in the 90s that you could say that we're having that now, but I actually don't think it's the same as the 90s because the difference is that these black characters, Spawn being the character that's at the forefront of it, they had more mainstream um what's the word? They had more mainstream representation. They were presented more in the mainstream because like you look at something like Hood Comics, right? You gotta like Hood Comics is something that's on. Are you familiar with Hood Comics?
Yeah, you told me about it.
Yeah, there's something that's they're like that's something that's like on the internet only. You can't go in a comic book store and find them shits. You know what I'm saying? Like fucking what's the dude? Because we met him at a convention. The dude with the little Egyptian Avatar series, Black Sands.
Black. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's on the internet. And while the internet is definitely a viable source for like entertainment, it's not the same thing as something coming out on television or something coming out in a movie theater or something like that, right?
Well,
And
that's why. Side note. That's why.
yeah,
I mean, the Creative Black Sands does have physical books out and stuff, and is trying to get a TV show, series thing going off the ground because even he understands that this can't remain here. Because if this remains here, it might not make it. But if it
it-
gets out there and if it becomes mediumed,
you,
if that's a word,
you just
then
made it a word.
it has life. It has more life to it.
Well, yeah,
And I think that with a character like Spawn, and another thing too, I wanted to say too, that because I know there are people who like to bring up stupid ass counter arguments that make no sense because they have no historical context. When people, there are people who will say, "Oh well, why do they have to be black? Why can't they just be that?" Kind of like if someone say, "Oh, don't say the black Green Lantern, just say Green Lantern." People who say shit like that, and it's like, no, you need to. I think people need to understand that a lot of things can be true at once. He doesn't have to be Spawn doesn't have to be just his blackness doesn't have to be at the forefront of who he is, but you have to at least recognize it. If you
yeah,
can't recognize it
yeah.
and keep going, then you're doing a disservice. You have to recognize it. You can't say that it's a whatever when it really you have no idea how much that changes the perception because in a tiny little history lesson, and I always use this as a good example, because it's an amazing example, the Comics Code Authority, when EC Comics wanted to have a black lead in a science fiction story, just him being he's black, nothing else changes about who he is as a person. He's just a black guy. That's it. He's still a human being. There's nothing different or unique about him. He's just a guy. His skin just happens to be darker. But the Comics Code Authority was like, no. Why does he have to be black? Another thing that happened, which if Star Wars fans out there, if people are fans of Jedi Fallen Order or whatever, the character Cal Kestis in Jedi Fallen Order in those games, originally they asked, hey, is it possible for him to be a woman or a black someone or another person of color? They said that was a non-starter. And in the comments of that particular, when that particular article or that particular thing came out, people were like, well, why are you guys trying to make it woke? Or why are you guys trying to shoehorn your agendas into it? And everyone was like, well, hold on. Let's back up for a second. If this is an original character that has no basis on any character that's existed in Star Wars canon, and this is a fresh new character, why is them being a black man, an Asian man, a woman, a non-starter? Why
Well,
is that a non-starter?
we
If race wasn't such a big deal, the live action Peter Parker would be a Japanese boy. He'd be an Indian boy.
I think
He'd be
so.
he'd be he'd be anything other than Tom Holland. But everyone else around Tom Holland, all of his sidekicks and his partner friends are all ethnic. So when you his love interest, his sidekicks, his partners, the people beckoning at his feet, all ethnic.
I mean, but the
So
funny thing, you saw that in the Flash too, and I'm not the movie, the TV show. I'm like,
see
th- this
that
is a rainbow. Yeah, we are Flash. That no, we are the Rainbow Coalition, my
right.
because this.
That's why I call the Spider-Man movie Spider-Man and his ethnic friends. You know, like Spider-Man his amazing friends, and Spider-Man his ethnic friends. Because I'm like, and there are people who are like, oh, why do you got to see the world that way? Why do you got to see things that way? And it's like, if you when you write, when you create, you have to see the world that way. You kind of have to see the world that way.
But
If you want to say
also,
any, like I said, if you want to say anything, you need to see the world for what it's showing you and what it's saying, what it wants people to feel and wants people to think. I remember
the,
Michael had told me, I don't know if it was you or Michael who told me about, I forgot if he said it was Superman. It was a conversation between John Jones and Superman. And he was just like, why as a Martian we're both aliens, but we have different privileges, you know? And also Michael's point that if Superman can soak up the sun, why does he look the way he look? And I'm like, well, he's a Jewish allegory, so that's different. But I get what you're saying. I get what Michael means when he says that. But I just say all that to say that as much as you want it to kind of be invisible and kind of just be, it is what it is. You kind of just want a character like Spawn, his likeness to be like, yeah, he's black, all right. But anyway, there's also this stuff. You still have to make the point that, all right, we have a black man in this position who has this autonomy, who has this power, who is a threat to evil forces, who garners respect, who has love, who has loss, who has people who look at him and they see someone who they love, you know.
well,
And,
what's interesting.
and I, oh, go ahead.
No, what I was gonna say too is like to add on to your point, Spawn is probably the blackest comic book character because it's a story about a black man abused by the military-industrial complex, also someone who is abused by the spiritual military-industrial complex, but also it's a story about black love. And I feel like
Yeah.
that part of Spawn is also very
Who uses
under.
chains as a weapon?
Yeah, right. I don't know. I don't know if Todd was like,
I think something possessed him. I really do. I have a theory that a lot of creators, we get our ideas and our understanding of how to create things from a higher source of energy, and we all pull from that same pool. And I really feel like something possessed him to create this character, because
Well,
and I'm just being realistic. Todd is a white man. So I am genuinely surprised he made his guy. He made his guy black.
I'm not, because you have to look at the generation that Todd McFarlane comes from. Todd McFarlane is Gen
Well, the
X.
only that's true, but at the same time, if you look at the guys who have in the past created characters, they made sure that they found a way.
Nah,
Miguel's full name ain't Mexican. Is all I'm saying.
so,
So
but hold up. So there's another conversation to have right now. So the creators that Todd McFarlane were inspired by were guys like Chris Claremont, and that's very important because Chris Claremont is probably one of the pioneers of multicultural. Dog, look at New Mutants. Like, no, why does nobody ever discuss that New Mutants is really what people say the X-Men are? This multicultural team of brown motherfuckers, because most of the original New Mutants, they were brown. They weren't white. They weren't predominantly white living in a mansion. You know, you had a Vietnamese character, you had a Native
yeah,
American character, you had an Afro-Brazilian brown skin character. You had
which is not expressed at all in comic in X-Men movies, for real,
oh,
for real.
Roberto.
A lot of
Well, yeah,
of
because
the
I in my
multicultural
X-Men
X-Men.
'97 video, I actually talk about that in that script. But
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
but but um but yeah, like, so you have to look at who those guys were inspired by. And if you look at all of early Image, very multicultural, dog. Like
but
fucking
I feel like I have to keep laboring this though, because I don't want people to feel like they're being attacked or that they're wrong for. Because I remember, bro, I forgot what they were talking about, but this one white guy was like, "Oh, I feel ashamed to be white because of ABCD or whatever." I'm just like, please don't be ashamed to be anything, because that's how radicals they will use you as an example and twist your words and your feelings to make you an example as to why speaking on these things is bad, you
no,
know.
no, no, definitely.
And that's what I don't want. I just want people to understand that historical context is important as to why characters like a Blade and Spawn really stand out,
Well, so
because of just what they represent. Even a character like Blue Marvel really stands out, especially with Blue Marvel, Monica Rambeau. These characters stand out for a reason, is because they're, or at least for us, they are black characters in spaces where black people, and it's not saying that white people are saying black people can't be there, but black people have said that we can't be there to
yeah,
each
no,
other.
so definitely. So there's another important aspect to Spawn that ties into the whole Generation X thing. Spawn is the first prominent black superhero that's not born out of black exploitation, and I also think that's something that really needs to be discussed because if you look at characters like Luke Cage and Monica Rambeau and John Stewart, they're
Even
and
Blade.
Falcon, they're all black exploitation babies. They're all
Yeah,
born out of there, right? But
yeah.
Spawn is not born out of that same aesthetic, and I find that to be so very interesting because nobody is having these conversations about this character at all. Fucking Comics Explain not talking
Because
about this shit.
people see the extremes. They only see the extremes. You see it's the same thing with Wolverine. It's the same thing with Wolverine. You don't see it. To the average person, that is just a guy, angry guy with claws. We don't see People don't see the love that he's lost. People don't see the drama that he's been through. People don't see the Weapon X program. People don't see the life that he's lived, the people he's lost, the pain he goes through. People don't see
So
that. They just see, he's a cool guy, angry guy with claws. For the most part, generally, people don't. Not saying that they have to, not saying that it's wrong, but it's just like, it's the same thing with Spawn. Spawn unfortunately suffers from the fact that he's even more visually extreme. You
I
got
mean,
you're in all black. Like I said before, you're in all black. You got skulls on you, dude. You are the stereotypical edge lord. You are the Lord. You are or Lord of the Edge. If
I
it ain't
mean,
you on the throne, it's Batman. What they did with Batman was they made but this is just a product of just circumstance though. Batman just happened to have Spawn and Batman, like I said, same. They're the same, but Batman just happened to have more people itching to elaborate.
no, I think it was that
No one
Batman
wants
had
to
the
elaborate with Spawn
all right, so with the Batman point,
except us.
there's more to that because it's not just that Batman had more people, it was a timing issue. A lot of Batman's popularity in modern culture within the past 50 years is actually owed to James Bond. And Spawn don't have nothing like that. Spawn doesn't have a
No,
cultural thing to latch on. Because think about this shit, right? Everything that we love about Batman now is James Bond, the womanizer, the gadgets, all of that shit, the hyper the hyper
globe
function.
trotting,
You said the what? Yeah, yeah. Even
globe
the shit with
trotting.
Rajal. No, Rajal
Yeah,
Ghul is a James Bond villain, just in
but
Batman comics.
you can't. But with Spawn, you can't. You can't do that.
You know, you
I'm not
can't.
saying all right. I'm not saying you can't do, but you got to look at. You have to. It's. I don't know what you call this. When you look at Batman's suit, right? There's a practicality to Batman's suit. Batman can also be outside of his suit, and it's still interesting. There, I mean, but I guess you got to go back to making Al Simmons interesting. But it's
That,
just
that's what.
Spawn. It's the all of him. Granted, Spawn can versatile his suit. He can change up the look of his suit. But it's
I
just
don't.
that there's so much. Batman is just a man. Al
It's
Simmons is not.
but
He's Superman.
it ain't. I'm trying to say it's not that. It's the word zeitgeist right a lot, right? That's what it is. Spawn hasn't been attached to anything significant to the cultural zeitgeist. I'm gonna give you another example of a superhero character whose prominence was owed to timing. That is Deadpool. So I
Yeah.
don't. I'm writing something about Deadpool right now, right? And the one thing that really stuck out to me about Ryan Reynolds' interpretation and presentation of Deadpool and why it's so popular now and why that's such a weird thing is that Deadpool is a character that is built off of Gen X and millennial aesthetics. There was a fucking Deadpool movie where the end credit scene was from Ferris Bueller. There was a fucking Deadpool movie where the way that Deadpool talks in his sense of humor is a mixture of Chevy Chase and Zach Morris. Those are all very
So
millennial Gen
so
X.
so 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 do you think because I mean, I'm not gonna lie. As a screenwriter, sometimes I think about it. I'm not gonna lie. Uh, I think about what I would do in terms of how I would present Bond.
Mhm.
For me, because I'm 30, I don't. Oh, you might the voice you might give him, and not voice is an actual voice, but just voice of expression on screen.
Mhm.
Might not be the same voice I would.
No, definitely. And that's the beauty of generational disconnect. It's not a disconnect like
No, and I say that to say, if we are presenting a character like that today, his voice has to be today.
it has to be contemporary. No. So
Yeah.
I was going to get to that, right? So the reason I'm using those examples, right, is because a Deadpool movie actually could not have existed in 1995. It wouldn't have worked
Mm.
because
Hmm.
there's nothing. The cultural zeitgeist was not ready for that because we were still in it. Like everything that happens with these superhero characters, certain superhero characters pop off because of a cultural need for them to exist and have prominence. It's the same reason that Black Panther popped off the way that it did. There was a cultural need for that character at that point in time in 2018 that was not
Yes.
there when Wakanda Forever came out. That's why that movie didn't
Yes.
have the same cultural relevance. But
Yes.
you can look at Tony Stark too. Tony Stark, and I argued with people all the time about this. Nobody gave a fuck about Tony fucking Stark 30 fucking years ago. I'm sorry. They just didn't. When
They
Extremis
didn't.
happened, when the fucking Armor War shit happened in like the 80s, nobody gave a fuck about Iron Man. He was a B list character. In order for Iron Man as played by Robert Downey Jr., to have cultural significance, he needed to exist in a post 9/11 world. That's why that character resonated so much. And I don't think people understand that about these characters. People just think, yo, we're going to start throwing superheroes at the wall and see what. No, there
Yeah.
has to be a cultural need for these characters to exist, which means that they have to be drawing from something culturally significant. So,
You know,
with,
well, for me, I'll say this. For me,
yeah,
uh, we live in DC, so the cultural significance, at least for me, I see, especially, and it happens honestly. The TV show does this in spades. Also, Spawn had dealt with for a lot of crime that was that was out of control, and he dealt with that in a way like I used to tell Michael a lot. Like if you look at DC at night, the parts where people don't go or aren't where tourists don't go, places where we've either have lived or have passed, very dark, very dank alleys, very dark areas, very abandoned houses, very dark areas. And even in Spawn, he's always lurking in dark alleys.
yeah,
But also in DC, we have a high murder rate here. There are deaths happening a lot every day here.
yeah,
And when you have a character like that who can speak to that, who can fight against that, that's a relevant thing.
it is.
Not saying that he has to be, the fucking not saying that nigga gotta be the guardian angels. but
Wow.
but it's about cultural relevance. There
It
has to be
is.
a
Yeah.
cultural need for, especially because he's so larger than life. But the
Well,
problem, but the thing is, there already is a cultural need. We it this now is the time, because going back to what you said about Batman, how Batman had time on his side. You could all of the Batman stories Batman is able to be as free as he can be today because of the backbone of all of the writers and artists and creators who came up with the worst and the best for him over generations. And now Batman can be anything. Spawn
that,
needs that.
so
And Spawn now has that. But the difference is that Spawn doesn't have that with just the comics. Spawn has that with the reality of the things that are going on around us today. The same thing with Iron Man. Iron Man couldn't exist, like you said. Iron Man couldn't really be
the
prominent
movie,
hidden. Yeah, the movie. Right.
yeah,
The movie couldn't be prominent hidden until you get to a post 9/11 world. Spawn is the same way, especially since we're now in the crux of another war or whatever that we're in. Because at the end of the day, Spawn is a soldier. And I
yeah,
think that, like you said, that's something that you need to pull from.
you do. So, and I want to say this too, because I want to. I wasn't done with the cultural
No, go
thing,
ahead. I'm sorry.
because no, you know straight, because you bring up a good point. But the thing about Spawn, and I'm gonna talk a little bit about the comics, the TV show, and where Spawn is now. Right. What made Spawn the animated series work was the cultural zeitgeist that he existed within. Because when you look at that show, Spawn the animated series was the first animated late night show on HBO, right? But it was also a show that was drawn from a lot of other shit. A lot of Law and Order is in Spawn the animated series. A lot of Tales of the
Hmm.
from the Crypt is in Spawn the animated series, and those are things that were culturally
Yes.
relevant. You know what I'm saying? And like
Yes.
those aesthetics can exist now, I guess, right? You know what I mean? Because honestly, all Spawn is he's Batman mixed with Freddy Krueger. If you really want to be
Yeah.
technical about it, you know what I'm saying? But
Spawn is he's a horror story.
he's I think Spawn is more than horror. I think Spawn is one of the most multi-genre.
He is more than horror, yes. But if let's say for argument's sake, we're sticking on the idea of an adaptation, say a film adaptation, because let's be real, a character's film is bigger than their comic. It just is. So
Yeah,
if we're talking about a film, for my first Spawn film, yeah, I would make it horror. It's more horror based. It's horror superheroics, of course. I would say darker than the first Hellboy movie.
way
Like
darker,
there,
definitely.
yeah, like there's superheroics happening. Of course. Oh, don't. Oh, there are superheroics happening. But at the same time, this is a very dark story. It's as simple as that.
Yeah,
This is a very dark story. So now you're dealing with a character who is just not your average superhero, and that needs to be put across. If you're making a Spawn movie, if Blumhouse is doing it, they need to put across this is not this isn't Superman, this isn't Batman, this isn't Iron Man. Like this is real shit's happening here, and the fantastical is around it, but it's kind of like it's kind of like Predator. Honestly, it's like Predator is still an action film, but it's also a heavy science fiction film.
yeah. It's
It's
multi-genre.
also it's also a horror movie. Honestly, Predator is the perfect, and this is random, but it's true. Predator is the perfect, honestly, example of like a springboard of how you can do a Spawn movie, because everything you need for a Spawn movie is in Predator.
A lot of it is. Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of it is. A lot. Yeah, you're right about that. So actually, I wanted to ask you this because I feel like you're the perfect person to ask. So if I'm mentioning cultural significance or culturally significant genres that impact the superhero genre, right? What is the most significant horror uh thing that could really fuel Spawn as a media franchise?
What do you mean?
Sorry. So I mentioned Iron Man and the Avengers. They thrive because they exist as post avatars of like post 9/11 superheroes.
Oh, no, it's so it's funny. It's so funny, but it's true. I think anyway, because this is how my mind works. Because when I try to get inspiration, I go out of left field to find inspiration because I feel like it's the best. That's for me. That's the best way to get inspiration. I go out of left field. A character exists already that Spawn could have a springboard for. And that's Candyman.
Mm.
Because
Mm.
yeah, yeah,
Mm.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
Because if I am, like I said, if I'm making a Spawn movie, I, Spawn has to be. Remember and this is in the TV show once again does this in spades. When Al Simmons shows up, he's not fighting demons on the tops of Mount Olympus. He's not there yet. He's in the hood. He's in the nitty gritty. No one, and I say that, and I say that, and as as much as I love films, I feel like the movies that inspire me though visually, even though there are films that I would say I have secret inspiration from, and that's particularly what is it? Is it Tales? Is it Tales from the Hood? Is it that movie? Is it what is that movie? The one
Which
with David Loudon Greer and
that's Tales from the Hood
so
with
that movie is
with
slept.
Crazy Eight and yeah, yeah.
Tales from the Hood to me is a slept on movie. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful looking movie. It cap that and People Under the Stairs. Urban
Yeah.
backwoods horror is I love that shit so much. Candyman does it. People Under the Stairs do it. Tales from the Hood does it. It's because and it's and it's only you can the only people who can really get that you have to live there. And like I said, that we see that we used to see when in the morning at night when you see this other side of these urban areas because they're not touched up because gentrification hasn't touched them. It is scary. It's dark. There's a lot of broken down fencing. There's a lot of burnt down houses. There's a lot of empty developments. There's a lot of unfinished developments. There's a lot of graffiti. There's a lot of wetness. It's very dank. And that's the vibe that you get. And in a film like, say, Candyman is is it, granted it started as something else, but the first film, and even the second, even the reboot, speak to the cultural relevance of bad things happen in ghettos. Crime happens in ghettos. Unsolved trauma and murder and injustices happen in ghettos a lot.
Mhm.
And if you throw in superheroics into that, and then you throw in horror, because it is horror without the Spawn stuff, it's horror for people who live in those type of situations. There are people who don't understand the concept of having iron around their doors, or I mean around their windows, bars around their windows. There are people who don't understand the concept of a lot of things that people live and go through every single day. Hearing
Yeah.
gunshots at night. Some people don't. When you hear gunshots at night, someone may have died. You might have heard someone die. That's just the reality. I
Yeah.
remember you told me someone got shot in front of you
Yeah.
at
More than
Naylor
once.
Road, at Naylor Road Station.
It was
So it's
Southern
like,
Avenue, but yeah.
oh, it's Southern Avenue. My mom works at when she has to do her station manager stuff, and she goes to different stations. She hates. There are station managers who hate going to different stations, like Congress Heights.
Oh yeah. Congress Heights
And
is
I'm not.
horrible.
Yeah. So it's like these are. I feel like that the mixture of those things haven't happened yet. And I think Spawn is perfect. You turn Candyman into a superhero. That would be my pitch for Spawn. You turn
Mm.
Candyman into a superhero. You turn the poetry and the tragedy of a character like Candyman into a superhero. That's what you do. At least for your first film, because we don't need to know about the bigger world yet. We don't. Because one, that's too much money. Let's be real. That's too much money. All you need to focus on, which is unfortunate, which is funny, but it's true. The first Spawn movie got it right in a sense. They focused on the two heavy hitters, which is the beef between Clown and Spawn and Jason Wynn. But you could also tie it into the fact that Jason Wynn has a part to play in some of the issues that are going on in ghettos that don't get talked about. Has a part to play in allowing certain things to happen, or allowing gangs to come in and have certain things, or allowing terrible people to come in and make false bad business moves, or allegiances and affiliations with gangs and people and terrible people. Like Spawn can start out as someone who is in it for himself and realize that he has to be in it for the same way how in the TV series Spawn was in it for himself, and then he eventually says, "What? Get out of my alley. These are my
Hmm.
people now." It needs to be the same way. Spawn needs to be adopted by a people. He needs to be loved by people. There are people who feel like, no, like they're it's the same way it's the same exact thing that happens in the TV show. The homeless people in that alley start to respect him. They call him Al. He is friendly to them. He's one of them. And it should be the same way in the Spawn film, where it should be like, the residents of this rundown area, or the residents of this rundown neighborhood, like people who stick together through hardship and struggle, and they got somebody protecting them because no one else protected them.
I mean, and
Police
also
didn't protect them. The
that's
police didn't
also
protect them.
that's also, and I know people will be like, "Oh, he's reaching with the race stuff," but that's also another interesting layer to dig in with Spawn. Like he's a
It's a
protector of
layer
the
of
down. Well, he's a protector of the downtrodden and like the oppressed, like members of the Black Panther Party, right? Because like they
like
were people.
or just the unseen people who live in ghettos.
Yeah,
Unseen. The homeless people that were in that alley were unseen, downtrodden people that no one cared about, not even the police. They could die one day and no one would see them again. You got a big major homeless population in many cities across America. The relevance is there.
no, it definitely is. It definitely is. I'm just gonna say one last thing about Spawn that neither one of us mentioned, and it ties in with Spawn being derivative. Spawn is also very derivative of another superhero character, and that's Cloak from Cloak and Dagger. And I'm like, they the same motherfucker. Like,
Yeah, yeah, no, I can see that. I love Cloak.
I
Well,
love
I love
Cloak
Cloak
too.
and Dagger. Yeah,
Well, no,
Cloak and
because
Dagger are dope.
a lot of Cloak and Dagger is like them being runaways and helping the downtrodden people and
Yeah,
like yeah, and I'm like,
helping
damn that.
druggies.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, that's Spawn.
Like,
That's
that's what Spawn can be. Spawn can be elevated street level. That's what I would call it. Say if someone says elevated horror, I'll say, well, Spawn is elevated street level. He has powers, but he keeps it. he doesn't use his powers to save the world. He uses powers to save the people. He uses powers to save the little boy who's
Well, I
running
think
from the freaking mobsters. Eventually, heaven and hell come knocking. Yes, Spawn has to answer, but it does not have to be in the first movie.
well, no, not really, because Spawn is all about escalation, like kind of like what the
Yes.
Dark Knight movie or the Batman Begins and Into the Dark Knight movies did. It kind of everything got bigger and bigger as the movies and the story progressed. Which honestly, the best comic book story arcs do that. Think about
Yeah.
Ultimate Spider-Man. Ultimate Spider-Man, not the Miles Morales one, the original Ultimate Spider-Man. That book started very small scale, and then by
Hmm.
the end of it, that motherfucker Spider-Man was like saving the world, wasn't he? Like teaming up with the Avengers and shit.
It's it's something that I think Spawn can do. You surround him with a good cast of characters. You focus on, like we said, you focus on the things that make him stand out, that have always made him stand out, that have always made him endure, and you go from there.
Yeah,
And now, does that always constitute a good story? No, because it's hard to make a good story. It is very hard to make a good story. It's hard. It's extremely hard. Movies make it. You think Marvel actually made it look easy, that you can just do good constantly and succeed, because it doesn't work that way. It is lightning in the bottle. That's why people are starting to feel some type of way now. But it's not Marvel's fault. It's the way things are. The stories are hard. Tell a good story is hard. Making a movie is hard. Sometimes you think you got it, other times you don't. That no one's not going to put millions of dollars into something that they don't believe in.
that's
They
real.
just they
And I,
don't. Don't ever think that some shit. Oh, it's just a cash grab. Every movie that's ever been made is a cash grab. That's why they tell you. That's why the box office exists, so they can tell you how much money the movie made. If it wasn't a cash grab, no one would ever bring up how much money a movie made ever. It's a cash grab. It's always a cash grab. But a good movie is always a balance of art and commerce. So yeah, it can be a cash grab, sure. I think a Spawn movie would make money, because visually, and once I'm going back to, once again, the boundaries of cinema, they need to be broken even further. Visually, we have not seen something like Spawn before, done right. Yeah, you've seen it in the '90s movie, sure. But I'm talking about with today's technology and today's vision of how things can be, we have not seen that. The same thing when I told you what I told you about Crypto the Superdog. We haven't seen that in live action. We haven't seen what else cinema can do. We've only stayed in what's safe, and Spawn can't be safe. You got to swing. You got to swing. You have to swing.
swing
I
better,
like
better.
swinging. Yeah, like you gotta swing, man, because the same way Art McFarlane swung when he left, when he swung out and did his own thing and had Spawn, and Spawn came out swinging, and it was balls to the wall. The same action has to be done when bringing him out of that mold into live action, into whatever other medium he's in, either that be television or movies or whatever. Because I think comics is just I think Spawn is too big for comics,
Mm.
and I think comics shouldn't be. He's too a lot. Like I said, a lot of this shit is too late. It's too late. The developments that's happening in Spawn now, too late. Should have happened 20 years ago, 15 years ago. The Spawn should have Spawn should have, if that movie was successful, Spawn we'd be like, yeah, that trilogy was great. We don't even have that. It started, it failed, it moved on. So it's like that. And it's also, another example is The Crow.
I think The
Look at
Crow was.
all of the people trying to keep remaking The Crow and doing this with The Crow and doing that with The Crow, and you keep missing key to why that story is so beautiful, because you keep focusing on the black leather, the grunginess, the violence. And yes, that's there, but it's yes and. Not it's not this or that. It is yes and. It's
Uh,
yes, there's this, and there's that. Yes, there's violence and death and carnage and stuff, but there's also a story about a broken person, a story about whatever, and you know, the tragedies and someone rising from that. But I think that a lot of the times people don't, they see it in extremes. And
th-
Spawn is the extreme.
well, and I think Spawn is a different animal than the Crow because I don't think the first of all, I think the Crow was lightning in a bottle, and I don't think it was something that was really designed to be A, serialized, and B, franchised. It's not a
No, no,
that's
yeah, no, I agree.
yeah, I think
In terms of what James O'Barr was trying to say,
I think
the Crow is very much from the heart
it's from the
for
heart, and
us.
it's one and done because it's from a
Yeah.
very tragic point in his
Yes.
life. So
Yeah.
it wasn't a thing that I think that was designed to be a continuous, everlasting mythological thing. They just
Yeah.
made it into that to make money off of it. But Spawn actually not only can be that, it is that.
Yeah.
But you know, um, shit, I forgot my point. But like I think Spawn can be a lot of different things because once again, my stance, and this is really my closing statement, is that all of these characters have the potential to be great. It matters. What matters is the point in time. It's like a series of cultural events that really need to happen that makes
Mm-hmm.
these characters relevant. It's something like socially, culturally, and politically potent that makes that like converges at the same time that makes these characters relevant. You know what I mean? Because once again, you couldn't have made Deadpool in 1997 because the character hadn't been fine tuned like that. And I think
Yeah. Right. Right.
I think with
Spawn, but
Spawn,
Spawn's ready.
I think the problem with Spawn because I'm gonna counter what you're saying. I don't think it's too late for Spawn. I think now is the time that you start
What I
molding
no,
Spawn.
what I'm saying,
But
but that's what I said.
but
Spawn's ready.
Well, yeah, because like when Spawn came out, the movie came out 1997. That character had only been around for like 4 years when that
Yeah.
movie came out. So he didn't have enough of a foundation to draw from. Because the thing that makes these comic book movies so potent is that they're drawing from like decades and generations of stories that
Or
existed.
hey, let's look at it. What about this? We look at it from, what is it, glass half full instead of glass half empty? What
Mhm.
if what if the same way Batman had to be built upon and built upon and built upon before we get what we get Batman as he is today? What if in the grand scheme of things, that Spawn movie is was the next necessary step for that character to figure itself out?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's kind of what I was trying to say. And
Yeah.
I think all comic book characters benefit from that. I think that's why comic book um characters are far more everlasting than something like let's say Harry Potter because there's only really one way you can do it. Harry Potter, like you can't do Harry Potter as Dirty Harry, even though
Yeah.
that would be interesting to me. But you can't do like Harry Potter as John Wick and shit, right? You know what I'm saying? Not really, because people are not going to buy into that. But with comics, the the reason that comic book characters last for generations is because they're the only characters in mass media whose whole existence is defined by them being recontextualized. That's one of the reasons why I'm actually one of the people that's like, I don't think that manga and anime is better than comics. I think that they do different things well and they do different things bad, but in the grand scheme of things, most anime characters and manga characters are pretty static. Like Goku is always going to be that way. There's no version of Goku that they can make where like they completely recontextualize the character to be something very different than what we know the character as, but still the same, right? Because with Ninja Turtles, you have goofy 80s Ninja Turtles, you have the Mirage comics, you have the 2003 series, you have the Rise of the Ninja Turtles, all very different versions of the same character. You don't really see that with anime. You know what I'm saying? But with the character, like with superhero characters, they're tailor made for that. And that's why I'm like, I don't think any comic book character for real, that's been around for like 40 years can ever die out or like completely go away. Or how people like, oh, the Marvel fatigue and superhero fatigue. It's not a real thing. It's a thing that somebody made up because their introduction to superheroes came from movies, and they feel like there's a shelf life for a movie franchise, and that's not a pure representation of superheroes. It's a component of how superheroes are represented. So I think in order for Spawn to really thrive, he just needs to keep existing. He just needs to keep being recontextualized until they get the right formula for that character so that he becomes the true icon that I think he deserves to be. That's my final point.
And I agree with that.
Yeah, okay.
It's no, you know, I mean, I guess yeah. I mean, that's my final point too. It's like the recontextualization has to happen. You know, a lot. You know, there has to be a lot of failure and success at the same time, and
Mhm.
failure leads to success.
Yeah.
You know, so and it's not. I just hope that whatever Blumhouse does, already afraid. I'm gonna be afraid until I see a trailer. I'm gonna be afraid because the thing about the thing is too. What really it's like Blade. I mean, well, what Jamie how Jamie Foxx sees Spawn. I don't even know if Jamie Foxx reads Spawn. I don't know if Jamie Foxx is reading Spawn or thinking about these things or even making these types of connections. I don't know what Jamie Foxx is interested in. That's why I think the person that should handle Spawn is Jordan fucking Peele. But whatever. And not because Jordan Peele is the go-to black director guy, but because Jordan Peele has already shown that what he can do with cultural relevance and horror, he can do it in spades.
Mm.
Us, not that much. I didn't like Us. And but it's just it's the fact that Jordan Peele will always first find the angle of how can I create culture, how can I tie this to something that's culturally relevant before I tell this story. Even with Nope, it's the concept of spectacle and the dangers of spectacle. You know, Jurassic
Mhm.
Park is about the dangers of spectacle. So it's it's not it's well Jurassic World is about the dangers of spectacle, but it's not you know I'm not saying no one can do it who's not. I'm not saying you got to be a black director to do it. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that you got to have your ear to the ground of the world, to the world when you're doing something like this. Like it's just something that I feel like should be taken with the utmost care. And for
Mhm.
somebody like Todd McFarlane to sit to be like, oh, I just want him to be a shadow. Oh, I just want him to be lurking. Oh, I want the main characters to be Sam and Twitch. Get out, get out. I know this is your baby, but you're giving him the wrong formula. You're giving the wrong baby formula. You dropped him on his head. You didn't feed him at night like you were supposed to. He's not being bathed like he needs to. You're not brushing his teeth like he's supposed to. Are you teaching him? Are you reading to him at night? Are what are you doing? Are you spending time with him? You're not. You're just assuming he wants these things. You're dumb. That's why no one wants to work with you because you think that that you who have no experience in directing or screenwriting can just pop up and say I'm doing this. It doesn't work like that in Hollywood. It's as simple as that. It doesn't work like that. You're not about to come up to an executive and they're not about to give you millions of dollars who fail and then you pitch them a Spawn movie and then they look at Spawn and they go like, but he looks like that. Why do we need him to be a shadow? Why are we focused on these two boring characters when the money is in this cool guy with the cape and the guns? I'm confused. Why do you want to castrate your own character? Oh, but we can make it for cheap. And fuck that. What? No, no. Stop, Todd. That's my final thought. Stop.
Mm.
Let someone else write this movie.
Well,
Which I think they have. I think they are doing that though. I think he's let up a little bit. And it's like it's no disrespect to him. But it's like sometimes, and this is true of all comic book characters. Sometimes other people have your character's best interest in heart at heart more than you do.
Yeah.
Chris Claremont and the X-Men.
That's a whole nother can of worms, which
Like some people can just write your characters better than you,
yeah.
because in the nature of comics, it's just like that. Because you're constantly getting a revolving door of writers. So someone's going to come along, Todd, who's going to usurp you, who's going to run circles around you, and you won't be able to keep up. And they have done that. And someone is going to do that when they make this movie, hopefully. And it's no offense to Todd McFarlane at all. Without him, we wouldn't have Spawn. But it's like this is a different medium now, and
Yeah.
different things, different approaches are required for different mediums. And if we want Spawn to succeed and keep going, Spawn needs a great movie. Spawn needs either a great movie or a great TV show. Invincible, look at Invincible now. Invincible is becoming a zeitgeist. Not becoming. The Invincible has become a long overdue zeitgeist show, zeitgeist character, and he'll continue to grow to become that because of that TV show, not because of the comic book. I was recommending the Invincible comic book to people years ago, and because no one knew what it was.
Yeah, I missed out on a good opportunity to to buy the first issue when it came out. But I mean, fuck it. That was like 20 something
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah, like when I was in 20, bro, in 2012, 2013, I was telling people, you gotta read Invincible. You gotta read Invincible. Read Invincible. Like Invincible is dope. Invincible is our Invincible should be our Naruto. And he's not, unfortunately, because Amazon feels like, Amazon has billions of dollars, but they give us shitty ass animation. But that's a whole different story. But it's just it's overdue. It's
Yeah.
overdue. It's overdue. That's my that's what I'll say. That Spawn's glory is overdue, and I hope that he gets it, because it's the same thing with Blade. If their glory is overdue, their glory is overdue. A lot of these characters, their glory is overdue. And a character like Spawn, I think everyone will love Spawn. You don't have to be just black to like Spawn. Spawn is metal as fuck. You can be anything and like Spawn. There are people who love him who you wouldn't expect were people who are even into that, and they are. So it's like it's not impossible. It's just that you got to take it. The creators, the powers that be, have to take it seriously. You know, simple as that.
Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah. But
So
yeah, this is our big fat Spawn podcast.
yeah,
That's what we should call it, the big fat
the Big
Spawn
Fat Spawn podcast.
podcast.
I mean, well, yeah. Hopefully we can
The
oh my go ahead.
No, go ahead. You can continue. I was trying to come up with an acronym.
No, that's it. In fact, yeah, we gotta wrap it up because I gotta go to work in the morning.
Yeah, same, same.
Yeah, I gotta wake up at 4:59 and drive to where I'm not gonna say where I work because
Yeah, don't do
people be doxing and I don't have to punch
that.
somebody in the mouth.
Yeah.
You know, I'm gonna tell. Well, one day I'll tell you a story of how I think I almost got doxed online, but yeah, luckily that didn't turn into anything, which is crazy. But yeah,
Okay. Okay. But
exactly.
all right,
So
man.
there you got it. Spawn. We talked about it. We talked about him. We love the character.
Yeah, we clearly love the character. So here's to you, Al Simmons.
We probably gonna have to spin this back and talk about the action figures. But anyway, yeah, this is
Yeah, yeah.
Cytonius
We should
signing
just have
off.
we should just have
I'm
an
a,
action figure podcast too. To speak
Bruh.
or whatever. Oh, speaking of, because I keep trying to I keep trying to do this every podcast. But do you have a comic that you recommend, or a book, or anything, or a story, or a movie, any type of recommendation that you think people would want to read or pick up?
Um, let me see a comic that There's a shit ton of comics I would recommend, but
I'm gonna recommend.
yeah.
Uh, for people who just because to stay topical, I will recommend Spawn, Enemy of the State, which is
Mm,
which is a Spawn arc that um collects. Let's see, what does Enemy of the State collect? Anyway, read Spawn, Enemy of the State. It's a trade. You can get it in trade. I won't go into fully what it's about, but it does present Spawn in a different light. Yeah, so it's
mm.
Spawn 2, I want to say Spawn 284 through Spawn 288. So yeah, issues 284 through 288 is Enemy of the State. And it's fun. It's great. Great. I think Enemy of the State is a good Spawn series that people might enjoy.
I'm kind of in the archive phase of my life when it comes to like comic stuff. And I actually struggle to find like a lot of good what are those books? They're like art guides or like, the definitive history of Spawn and Image Comics. And there actually is an older kind of guidebook to Image Comics, and I feel bad that I can't remember the name of it. So I'm just gonna recommend watching Spawn the animated series.
Yeah, no, honestly, yeah. Oh God, watch that. That movie, that series needs to be like they need to like put that in theaters or something and be like, oh, for 1 week only, come see Spawn the animated
In
series
fact,
in theaters.
I'm trying to think of an issue of Spawn I want to recommend, and I feel like it's issue 5 where he
Hmm.
kills Billy Kincaid. I think that's the issue because it's a
Oh,
pretty famous.
King Spawn. Speaking of Billy Kincaid, King Spawn. If anyone wants to jump on Spawn, you can read King Spawn because King Spawn is about the return of Billy Kincaid as
There you go.
a serious threat.
Yeah,
So yeah.
that I'm actually hold up. I know what I would recommend, and even though I don't know if this stuff still exists, I would actually recommend anybody who's a big action figure collector, looking into Volume 1 of the Spawn action figures, like the
Oh
first
damn.
edition.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Those
like
are
the
yeah.
first run of
I
those.
think yeah. Yeah. I mean, hey, if you can find, I mean, hey.
They're pretty obscure, like right now. Well, not even obscure. They're just like they're older, but they're yeah, like
I gave my manga Spawn to a girl. So
I don't know what happened to my because I had manga Spawn because I had manga Angela and I had manga Spawn and I used to make them shits fight my Ronin warriors. But
I
yeah,
used to make my Spawn figures. I used to make my Spawn figures fight uh by McFarlane movie maniacs
mm,
because Todd McFarlane did uh hit different takes on the classic movie monsters. He also did horror movie characters in general. He had Pumpkinhead, which I still have never gotten. That's one of my favorite figures is McFarlane's Pumpkinhead, and I never got it
mm.
to this day. I never got
Actually,
it.
no, I'm tripping. I know exactly what I want to recommend, and it does time with this. I recommend watching the documentary The Image Revolution. It came out in 2014. And
Mm.
it's a documentary about the creation of Image Comics. And it's a pretty comprehensive documentary. Of course, they leave some stuff out. But it's a pretty good documentary. I'm a fan of documentaries about comic books. So any type of like archival historical information that I could find about comics, that's something I'm always gonna recommend.
And that's
And it's
it,
on YouTube.
folks.
Yeah, it's on
Yeah,
YouTube. Yeah.
man, a lot of cool documentaries are just free on YouTube. So if you seek knowledge, it's out there.
Yeah,
That's it.
it's free on YouTube. So even you, Darius, if you've never seen the Image Revolution document, I recommend watching it. It's really good.
Will do. Even though I think I have seen some of it. I know
Okay.
what you're talking about, but I didn't. I don't think I saw all of it. I think you recommended it to me before, and
I
I probably didn't even watch all of it.
yeah, I'd recommend. I would see like y'all recommend comics, and I recommend like books about comics because that's just where I'm at right now. Like it's not too much like other stuff. Also, yeah, if we cut the podcast off, we just gonna talk amongst ourselves now. But yeah, signing off.